Good morning. Can we have everyone come in and have a seat? If you can come up to the front, please. Good morning. We're about to get started. For those, all of you guys in the hallway that are on the Lodge Freeway, we're waiting for you to come in as well. If you can come towards the front, that would be great. Thank you so much. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being brave enough to say, okay, it rained all night. Hopefully it doesn't rain during the day. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Jillian Blackwell. I am honored to serve as the MC for today. I'm also the chair for Policy, Advocacy, and Ecosystem. I have several committee members in the room, Hodge Flemings. Who else is? Lashana's on the call. Spencer is here. So we are super excited about today. I also have a full-time job, believe it or not. I happen to be the North America Business Development Manager for Amazon, and just excited to be connecting with Connect 313. So without further ado, we do have a full day and a full agenda, so I will not hold you any longer. I'm going to ask Joshua Edmonds, who is Director of Digital Inclusion for the City of Detroit, to come on up.
I'm good. Well, good morning, everyone. You know, when I walked up here, it sounded like 100 people were clapping, so good job, everybody. I think that for me and for today, this is a ceremonial day. I've talked to some of you and was so excited because a lot of you were here 3 years ago. And on the positive note, a lot of us didn't make it through COVID. And so the fact that we're in this room today, well, that's a great sign. And in addition, for the folks who are actually watching virtually, we thank you for being here too. That again is a great sign. On the other note though, the reason why that's positive, because 3 years ago, we were in this space, and at that time, a less poised me was up here. A frantic me was up here at the time because, the story was, 3 weeks of planning to execute this summit. Yeah, that put me under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, and I'm thankful that pressure and stress got past the autumn. So good. So I'm carefree today, and no stress on me. But again, I want to thank everybody for coming. This is really going to be something where, as we get into some of these panels, we're able to take it up a notch as it relates to the future for digital equity in Detroit. Historically, and again, when we first started in our first summit, that was just talking about what is a digital divide, and more than anything, who am I, and who was I? Director of Digital Inclusion, that wasn't something that was common. Actually, at the time, we were the only city to have a Director of Digital Inclusion in the US. Fast forward now, we have several other cities who have agreed to take up that fight. And we're thankful for those other cities and those leadership, but we're also thankful more than anything for the leadership in this room, as well as the leadership from City Hall, specifically making this a mayoral priority. I'm not necessarily going to be talking as much in this intro more than what I've already said. I've already expressed what I want to express, which is just a sincere sense of thanks. But throughout the course of this day, I just want folks to realize that what we're doing here, it's not common. And what I mean by that, a lot of people, as we look at this digital divide, are now looking at some of the funding that the rescue plan is allocating as if job done. And I think that this is not really a job done approach. We're looking at it from a standpoint of, great, now that we have that's beautiful, but we've been rushing to just get to the starting line this entire time. It took us 3 years to get to the starting line. And so as we move forward, we need every single person with the commitments that we've been able to make today, whether that's been a financial contribution or just your effort, sweat equity, whatever it is, want to make sure that folks are realizing that the journey is just starting as we're doing this work, and all the big and bold stuff that we've done, that got us here faster, but there's a longer destination that we need to focus on, and I think that this is really going to be a testament to the leadership in this room. And speaking of leadership, I'm happy to be able to announce the next speaker here, who's Art. Art is our new CIO at the City of Detroit. A lot of you all know Beth Niblock and her leadership. And in my short tenure under Art, Art is a leader in his own right, and the way that he does things, it's phenomenal. And so I'm not going to talk up Art too much, because then I'm going to steal your talking points. And so what I am going to say, Art, if you could come to the stage, give a few words, and I'm thankful again for each of you. I'm going to be moderating all the sessions today, so this is not going to be the last time you see me up here. But again, I'm stress-free thanks to Autumn. All right.
All right, thank you, and good morning. Again, Art Thompson, Chief Information Officer for the City of Detroit. What an honor to be here. You know, to be honest with everybody, 3 years ago, the most I'd heard about Detroit hired this crazy young guy to kind of lead this effort and really push forward and get the city to where we need to be. And fast forward to today, I'd never dream I had the opportunity to be a part of this and be a part of something that is so needed. And I'm very, very passionate, as Joshua is, about this, because we have the opportunity to change the future for every young person who needs an opportunity, for every young person that just needs one little thing, and that's help. From a technology aspect, technology moves so fast. And thank you so much to all of our partners, because we can't do this alone. It's going to take every single one of us to drive this forward, to make this happen. And I got to say, Joshua has been phenomenal with Autumn and leading this charge. But as he said, we're just now getting to the starting line. And the opportunity within ARPA is fantastic. It's awesome. I couldn't ask for a greater opportunity. But now it's time for us to use this moment and really seize it and really push forward. There's not a finish line, 100 yards out. And let me tell you, this is going to be a marathon. We're going to be sprinting at this for a while. But as we make this sprint, we're going to make some huge hurdles. And we're going to really be able to accomplish things that 5 years ago people didn't think was even needed. So I'm very, very humbled by this, to just be here, speak with some awesome people, and really help push this forward. I think there are great things that come to the city, and I think the city of Detroit can be a leader in this initiative and really push forward to make this change. Without further ado, though, that is all I have for at this time, but I'm going to push it back to Joshua to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
I have like so many mics in my hands. I have a mic attached to my chest. I have a mic in my hand. There's a mic in front of me. So from a speaker standpoint, one, I want to really give a shout out to, again, a lot of our sponsors, the way that you all have leaned in, not just for Digital Inclusion Week, but for even well before I came here. Your commitment to Detroit, it's undeniable. And the first person we want to call to the stage, standing right here, Craig DeAugustini from Comcast. Comcast has leaned in with Connect 313, and the way that that's manifested has just been a constant level of support, and we couldn't be more thankful. So Craig, come on up. I don't know which one you're supposed to hold.
Use this one right here. Thank you. Thank you, Joshua. Good morning, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here and an honor to have an opportunity just to give some remarks. Let me begin by first applauding the incredible work of Connect 313 as they lead the charge for digital equity in Detroit. On behalf of Comcast, it's an honor to serve alongside other Connect 313 members. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this week's events. This is also an exciting time for Comcast. This year marks the 10th anniversary of Internet Essentials, Comcast's signature digital equity program, where we provide low-cost computer, low-cost monthly internet service, and digital literacy training. Back in 2011, Comcast recognized that as the nation's largest internet service provider, we have a responsibility to help close the digital divide. And so we embarked in 2011 on the Internet Essentials journey, as we called it. with the goal to connect as many families as possible to the power of the internet. Internet Essentials combats the main three barriers to broadband adoption by providing, again, low-cost computer, low-cost monthly service, and digital literacy training. Since the launch of Internet Essentials, it's become the largest and most comprehensive program of its kind and has connected more than 10 million people to the power of the internet, 80% of whom were not connected before signing up with Internet Essentials. We're proud of what has been accomplished through the Internet Essentials program, and we know that its success has only been possible because of our community partners. The key is public, private, nonprofits together working to solve the problem, and make no mistake, we know that at Comcast. As we all know, the last year and a half has been extremely tough. We've all suffered. Not only did the COVID pandemic affect our communities, schools, and businesses, but it also highlighted the negative impacts and magnitude of this digital divide. So more now than ever, it's critical that we all work together to address it. So during COVID, Comcast doubled down on our efforts to promote digital inclusion and launched 3 additional programs on top of Internet Essentials. The first is our Internet Essentials Partnership Program, where nonprofits or the private sector or schools can actually sponsor large groups of families under the Internet Essentials program. So that way we were able to get large groups of families connected at once. The second large program we launched last year was Comcast Lift Zones. Working with our nonprofit partners and community leaders, Comcast is providing robust Wi-Fi in community center locations throughout the nation. In fact, the company last year committed to launching 1,000 lift zones throughout the nation in 1 year, which we've gone over that number. But there are, more specifically, there are 23 Comcast lift zones in operation in the city of Detroit as we speak, with hopefully more to come. The third program we launched is Comcast Rise, a program to assist small, people of color-owned businesses who were most impacted by the COVID pandemic. RISE stands for Representation, Investment, Strength, and Empowerment. The program helps businesses to thrive in a digital economy by providing needed resources such as free technology, free internet, free phone. We also awarded a total of $1 million in grants within the city of Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park. We gave 100 people of color small businesses each $10,000 grants, and they were all either from the city of Detroit, Hamtramck, or Highland Park. Thank you. This was our first endeavor into the small business philanthropic world, and I tell you, the community partners in Detroit were amazing, one of them being TechTown. We didn't know what we were doing, and the best move we ever made was to call around and figure out, how do you launch a program like this in the city of Detroit? How do you get these businesses to fill out the applications, to trust you as a company? And so these community partners added credibility to Comcast, and we had almost 1,500 applications, I think it was. Anyway, I'd like to end and leave you with this. While Comcast is a global company, we are also a local company. We service all of Detroit, and we truly love this city. Please know that we're committed to being an ongoing partner in the battle to conquer the digital divide. We recognize the power that comes from public, private, nonprofit partners all working together. It takes all of us, and we stand with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, this one doesn't work. All right, so thank you again, Comcast, and I see that you all are already knowing this one to come up next. All right, so next on our list, Tupac actually. Where are you, Tupac? Oh, there you are. I swear, okay, I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just did not see you. I want to thank again Comcast, but on the Verizon front, you know, again, Tupac was one of the first people 3 years ago who said, hey, how can we help? And I think that that's what we found within this ecosystem that, sure, you look at some of the statistics around the digital divide, and you kind of look at the funding that we had in the budget on the city, which was zero, and the staff that we had, which was just me. And that isn't the greatest picture that gets painted. But as you're hearing the words from Craig, as he represents Comcast, and you're hearing from the story that I'm saying about 3 years ago, how Tupac is saying, how can we help? What you're seeing is that common thread of people really coming together for a common goal. And so, again, I can't thank the way that these sponsors have shown up, obviously for Digital Inclusion Week, but historically, and Tupac has really been a cornerstone of that. So, Tupac, why don't you come on up and say a few words?
Oh, it's really bright up here. So, first of all, let me start by saying, Josh, thank you so much for all your hard work. You are truly a dynamic, competent, just energetic. I start to call you a young brother. I'm a little older than you, but I don't want to be paternal. But seriously, I'm so glad that you're here, that we lifted you from the city of Cleveland, and that you are now a Detroiter doing this fantastic work here in the city. And also, your new colleague, Autumn, she's been excellent to work with, and so I'm glad that you have some help, and I hope that your department continues to expand because there's a lot of work to be done. And second of all, let me acknowledge my colleague and my friend, Brianna Ellison, who just joined us. A year and a half, she's a pandemic hire, so we're happy to have her with us as well. So again, my name's Tupac Hunter. I'm responsible for state and local government affairs for both the states of Michigan as well as Indiana. On behalf of Verizon, I'd like to thank, again, the city of Detroit and Connect 313 for their stellar efforts to, first of all, raise awareness concerning the digital divide in the city, as well as doing the important work of marshaling resources across the community to address this systemic issue that confronts us all. Verizon is very proud to sponsor Digital Inclusion Week and partner with you in this very important work. So digital inclusion, let me go forward. Digital inclusion is a key pillar in our corporate social responsibility plan that we call Citizen Verizon, wherein we have committed $3 billion in investment over a course of the next 5 years to do a couple things that I would like to highlight here. If I can go back, I went too far. There we go. So first of all, we've committed to train 10 million youth in digital skills by the year 2030, as well as 1 million small businesses. We plan to provide them the resources that they need to help them thrive in the digital economy also by the year 2030. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. You see there for youth training, we have what's called the Verizon Innovative Learning Program, as well as the Verizon Innovative Learning HQ, which is a K-12 education resources portal that we just launched a couple of weeks ago. So Verizon Innovative Learning, right now we are in 350 schools. We have touched almost 500,000 students through this program since 2012. And we will continue to grow this program as we move forward. Now, also, as it relates to small businesses, we just launched 2 weeks ago what we call Verizon Small Business Digital Ready program, which is comprised of several things: content and courses for small businesses, where they will take relevant business topics, marketing, finance, law, marketing, that sort of thing, as well as coaching and mentoring from experienced small business owners, as well as community and networking with other small businesses to share best practices, as well as incentives such as deep discounts for products and services and special grants as well. If you're interested in learning more, please go to verizon.com/smallbusinessdigitalready. And I want to go back and just reiterate something with regard to Verizon Innovative Learning. If you're interested in learning more about that program, you can go to www.verizon.com/learning. This, for those of you all that may be teaching your kids at home still. I'm not sure how many folks are still homeschooling, but certainly you probably know people that are doing that during this COVID pandemic situation. This Verizon Innovative Learning HQ is a very important resource. It offers free educational resources for parents, teachers, and students alike. So we're talking about STEM subjects, technology-related subject, AR, VR, all different types of exciting stuff that you can incorporate into your lesson plans if you're homeschooling, or just for extra supplemental work that you as a parent or someone in your community might like to do at home. So with that, I'm going to end just by thanking you all again for this opportunity to sponsor this Digital Inclusion Week again this year. We're very proud to stand with you, not just the City of Detroit and Connect 313, but it's alongside Comcast and AT&T and others that are doing this work across this community. So with that, thank you very much.
I'll take it though. Thank you. Well, I don't mind being called a young brother. I really don't. So thank you for that. Next on our list, folks who have just been, again, instrumental in our efforts, is Jasmine from Google. Google has been a company where a lot of our efforts in Detroit, sometimes it looks like some of these big investments that are coming in, you have these other folks who are present that you might not necessarily always see center stage. And I think that's been kind of our experience with Google, where they have always said, how can we help? How can we help? How can we help? And that has been something they've repeated at length over these past 3 years. And obviously, the headquarters is kind of shut down right now due to COVID, which is unfortunate. But the fact that, again, they're here today, that really speaks to their testament of how can I help in that nature manifesting by them being here. I don't want to belabor, again, the kind words here. So Jasmine, please come up to say a few words from Google. Yep. Oh, okay.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here today. It's back in my old stomping grounds because I do a chunk of my childhood in Indian Village, so super excited to be back here. My name is Jasmine, and I'm an operations manager with Google's Google Books project. But the biggest thing that I really enjoy about working at Google is that I get to be part of our volunteer efforts on the STEM outreach community in our office. We do things like office tours, and people like to see the cool stuff that's at the office, but mostly tech activities, resources. We host an annual STEM day for all area students to come by and see us. That's the really exciting part of our day, as well as job training, education, connecting with resources for returning citizens, returning learners or more advanced learners, the Detroit Drives Degrees programs, Detroit Chamber of Commerce, and several other community partners that tell us from a grassroots level what they need. We are so excited to be here today because we have the same goals and same passions for digital inclusion that this community, all of you here today, those of you that are watching virtually, are driving forward. Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Universally accessible and universally useful means inclusive and reflective of both a diverse user base and the diverse perspectives that are needed to build and make the tools that meet the needs of not just that user base, but the entire world, getting the world connected. That means that everyone, everywhere, should have access. It sounds like that's been happening through a lot of our partners as well as Google's initiatives, and that's what we've been striving to enable since the beginning. But that's not enough. Even if everyone has access, what are they able to do with it? That is where the useful part of the mission comes in. Google offers several resources that help those doers do some of that translation work. We offer free digital literacy programs through our Applied Digital Skills curriculum. We also do Hour of Code computer science education through thousands of schools every year in December. And as well as committing $1 billion in grants to the Google.org Foundation and 1 million volunteer hours from employees over 5 years in this line of work. In my work at the Google Books Project, we get to not only democratize access for millions of perspectives and narratives, because we're trying to digitize every book that has ever been printed, in the form of books and make them useful and available to those online for free. We want to give researchers, whether it's an individual student that's looking back on their ancestry or doing a project for school, the academic researchers that are doing research on the start of social movements through historical newspapers, or even how the word unprecedented has been used in previous pandemics. We're lucky. This is not the unprecedented use of unprecedented. So there is hope if we hang in there. We did see a spike in 1918 for the Spanish flu pandemic. So it's an aspirational mission, for sure. And no one can do it alone. I think that was Art's comment already, so I'll piggyback on that. That is why Google is thrilled to be a part of the Connect 313 mission, and we've been working with Josh for the last 3 years. We know we need to work together with all of you to make information accessible and useful for those who work, play, live, and learn in Detroit. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of the 3rd annual Detroit Digital Inclusion Week, and we look forward to engaging with all of you through the rest of the sessions.
Thank you. All right, this is the last one. I promise. You know what it is. Again, a big thanks to Google and obviously other aforementioned sponsors. And the last one coming up to the stage now, Robert Jones from AT&T. Again, Robert's been instrumental in our efforts for the past 3 years. He doesn't know this, but he's probably in one of my Detroit uncle category. My Detroit uncles, yeah, he's one of them. And I can't be more thankful for the way that these folks have leaned in, AT&T especially. So again, why don't you come up to the stage, Robert, and say a few words.
Just allow me to do something real quick. I've never seen my name in lights. This way I'll be able to tell my bosses where I was today. Joshua, you've already heard people comment about your youth. And if you know anything about the Bible and the Old Testament, there was a young man named Joshua that succeeded Moses, who led the people to the promised land. That's you, Joshua. And Shannon, your dad, the late Reverend Robert O'Doolin Jr., will be glad to know that I listened to some of his sermons. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Jones, and I am the Director of Legislative and External Affairs at AT&T here in Michigan. A company that I am proud to say that I have been at for 46 years. Most people can't believe it. They will tell you that what, you started when you were 2, and I gladly respond and say yes. Let me say how proud we are to be a part of the digital inclusion and the closing digital divide that are top priorities at AT&T Michigan, and that's why we're proud to sponsor the Detroit's Digital Inclusion Week events. Our focus on closing the digital divide has accelerated through our Believe Detroit initiative, working with community partners to bolster community access to technology and providing technology training to our young people. We are extremely proud to have worked with Hodge Flemings, who is here in the audience today, and his team on the Believe Detroit Tech Challenge, where we're giving young Detroiters hands-on coding and website training. Collaborations like these are the key to closing the digital divide and giving Detroit youth a future career path. AT&T believes connectivity is important for all Americans, and investments are needed to close the gaps that exist across this country. That's why AT&T Michigan is committed to making a difference in our communities and increasing connectivity, which is a critical part of that work. As virtual learning was the norm during the last school year due to the pandemic, AT&T partnered with Connected Nation to provide hotspots and free internet to more than 4,000 students across the state. We're proud to be a part of the communities we serve and invest in projects that will make an everlasting impact. At AT&T, we are also proud to be working with Human IT in its efforts to refurbish used technologies for Detroit students and families. This effort improves digital literacy while reducing e-waste. AT&T Michigan employees are working with Human IT to prepare at-home art kits for students through Metro Detroit Youth Clubs. All of these efforts focus on narrowing the homework gap and addressing inequities that exist in our communities. And of course, through our access from AT&T service, at-risk families can get connected to high-speed internet in their homes at only $10 a month. AT&T is proud to have stepped up our efforts to try to close the digital divide, but much more needs to be done. As American Rescue Plan dollars are allocated, AT&T hopes the administration and Congress will make needed investments to bring high-speed internet to everyone. If policymakers make necessary funding available, incentivize private sector investment in broadband, and modernize support for low-income households, we will be able to grow and maintain robust, resilient networks. AT&T is committed to closing the digital divide, and we look forward to work with all of you on that mission. We are proud to be a part of this innovative event and look forward to the progress we can all make together. Thank you.
Can we give another round of applause for our sponsors, ART, Comcast, Verizon, Google, AT&T, and not a sponsor, but certainly Amazon is in the house as well, right? I love the reference that Robert made. He said, if Moses said, let my people go, so Joshua's saying, let my people go get connected. So we're gonna move on to our fireside chat, National Digital Inclusion, Insights from the Field, how Detroit measures up, policy landscape, and how can Detroit drive policy better? And I'm gonna ask to come to the stage, I've been told to pronounce her name correctly, Francella Ochillo, who is the Executive Director for Next Century Cities.
Oh, actually, yeah, you can hear me. So the first things first, with Francella, before we even get into any of this, Francella has been a constant force in supporting Detroit and supporting communities across the country. We're gonna get into questions about who she is, what she does, but the story that I'm gonna tell, and she knows I'm gonna tell this story. Oh, well, maybe you don't then. Okay, well then buckle up.
Actually, you know what it is.
So in January 2020, there was a congressional opportunity. Many of you are aware that I went in front of Congress to talk about the matter of digital inequity. And it was Francella who was in the room, who was orchestrating that and fighting for that opportunity on behalf of the city of Detroit and obviously on my behalf. And there were comments about me being too young, me not necessarily having the experience to go in that stage, actually be able to convince people and ultimately be effective in that room. And that was Francella fighting those folks and saying, no, 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 he is that, he is that. And then at the same time circling back to me and saying to me, hey, you are that, right? But she, she was a fantastic, fantastic support. You know, as I, said that Robert was an uncle, Francella's a big sister to me. She has been an incredible advocate for Detroit and the way that we've been working. And we just can't thank you enough here in Detroit. So before I even get to the questions, I just needed to say that to you on stage and virtually as people are watching this, so they know what I feel and how I feel about the work that you do.
I thought you were going to tell a story about Michigan, how I met you.
Oh. Well, that's a whole other story.
Like, I didn't know what he was going to say. Thank you. So anyway, but I should start with first things first. Number one, I'm actually really excited to see the enthusiasm in this room, because I feel like this, when we're talking about even digital equity, quite frankly, when I started working on it, a few years ago, it wasn't embraced with the same enthusiasm and vigor as it is now. And I think that one thing I'm always worried about is, how do we humanize those stories? How do we empower people to be able to tell their own stories, to advocate for themselves? And really, to your point about the city of Detroit, I think all the time, I travel to a lot of cities. I've actually been to over 30 states. I talk to local leaders all the time, and very often they're the people who have the most gritty, resourceful, problem-solving ideas, but they don't get invited into the room. And so I always think about, many days I have run into many of your company's colleagues in Longworth. I used to hang out in Rayburn, and I used to hang out in the Senate buildings, and I used to just bring my notebook and I used to take notes, and I'd see what lobbyists did. So I was like, okay, this is what I need to do for communities. And so I would literally bring my notebook everywhere, and people knew they could find me in the Longworth cafeteria. And so that's actually how I got to know staffers. And so when staffers would be looking for people to testify, I would then say, I know you're going to reach out to the same person here, but I think you need to go reach out to this person in this city. And so it put me in a position where I could make an ask without, any sort of expectation that it was going to work out, but I was willing to try because I knew that those people in those other 30 states couldn't make that ask. So I think that all the time, as much as, being in Washington, D.C., you have a lot of privilege, I also think that comes with responsibility.
Wonderful. Well, okay. Wonderful. So the very first question we have for you, one, who are you? What do you do? And what is Next Century Cities?
So that is a very loaded question. My name is Francella Chillo. I am Executive Director of Next Century Cities. I am also a Technology and Public Purpose Fellow at Harvard University, and I focus on just studying not only the digital divide, digital inequities, how it intersects with separation of wealth, and also really being able to identify what are the things that we need to do to expand broadband access, increase adoption, and what are the emerging issues that are related to those two questions. And so I'm not just necessarily focused on the digital divide that we face today, as in 2021. I think a lot about the digital divide we're going to face in 2030 and 2050 if we do not find a way to make sure that people not only have digital literacy, but have opportunities to experience the full suite of benefits that accompany digital citizenship.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Next Century Cities?
And Next Century Cities is a nonprofit organization. We are focused exclusively on supporting local officials who are working to expand broadband access. Our goal is to show up in lots of different cities. Sometimes we show up in person to support their digital equity and inclusion plans. Sometimes that means showing up in a docket. I actually learned that from lobbyists. I was walking out of the 8th floor in the FCC. We were arguing over a specific telecom policy issue, and one of the lobbyists who was walking in the hallway, if you want to talk to the commissioners, you have to wait in the hall, there's like a seating area. And they said, well, quite frankly, Francella, nobody opposed us on the docket. And so I was like, okay, take notes. I know what I need to do. And so I go home, do my homework. And so with Next Century Cities in particular, every single one of our filings actually has comments from local officials. They either have feedback. Sometimes we put their comments in anonymously so that they are not really punished for them in negotiations later. I always want to make sure that they have anonymity and protection to be able to say, here's the issue, and we really want to create solutions. But I also want to make sure that we're giving those issues a name and a face, because we can talk all day long about this theoretical digital divide and what percentage of the United States feels like X. But I feel like, when I think about even Detroit, I was looking at some of the research we did here last year, back in 2020, and it's something like almost one in three Detroit residents back in 2020 did not have reliable access or a computing device in their home. And if we think about that being 1 in 3, that is essentially the size of Richmond, Virginia, or Dubuque, Iowa. Like, it's a really big number. That's almost 200,000 people that are saying, I'm not sure how to get online, how to be able to take classes, get workforce development training, do whatever is next. And I think, for me, I don't want it to just be this theoretical, oh, it's 30% of this group and this percentage of, this demographic, when quite frankly, if you're that 1 in 5, Detroit resident that doesn't have a computer at home, or you're part of that 200,000 that doesn't have reliable access, that is inherently local. Those local officials feel that acutely, like right here. So there's nothing that's theoretical about it. It's something that's a part of their everyday. And so at Next Century Cities, what we try to do is humanize those stories, make sure that those are part of our policy arguments, to think about how can we actually educate local officials to know, how do we get invites to the meetings you're not invited to? How do you get to testify before Congress for the first time or the 6th time? I want to be a part of that machinery, and a lot of times that happens behind the scenes.
Man, and that was only the first question. So, our second question, what key national points of discussion are you seeing that local communities need to be aware of?
The thing that comes up most often when I talk to local officials is, well, maybe over the past 3 months, I'll say, it's separate because, well, maybe let me back up before COVID. I think one thing that's important to talk about when we talk about COVID, I think, made the digital divide something that wasn't in someone else's neighborhood. I remember talking to someone who lived in Fairfax, Virginia. This person works for a think tank, was previously in government, and at the time I'm talking to this person, they're in their summer home. So they have a house outside of DC, which a lot of people have, and they're like in this like picturesque backyard. I can see it in the background, and she says, Francella, I didn't know it was in my neighborhood, and she was so frustrated that these kids don't have laptops, they don't have this. And I remember the panic, at the beginning of COVID, and I'm like, this is real for them every day. This isn't just because of COVID that this happened. It was because of COVID that you care. And that's the part that I always want to remind people. When my neighbor is disconnected, it's like when we're talking about, I was talking to a local official in Rochester, New York. She said, Rantel, I just wish people knew, if this were like dirty water in a house, people would treat it differently. Because if one house has dirty water, the entire block pays something. Maybe the neighbor has dirty water too. Maybe in that community, the kids miss a lot of school. Maybe in that whole zip code, people pay a little bit more in healthcare. Maybe people don't live as long, they aren't as productive. There are all of these things that are collateral damage that are connected to that one house with dirty water. And so when we talk about the digital divide, we to that household. Because, these 10 houses are in a good place, it's just these other 2 that we're struggling with. So it's not gonna be enough for us to just say, let's give them a computer, let's hope they show up for training at the library, and we're hope for the best. We have to be thinking about what are long-term sustainable investments that literally make those 2 that are outsiders a part of the entire community. Because if we keep counting it as just they are the ones who are disconnected, we will always treat it as a loss to that household. But if we think of it as a loss to the community, we start thinking about, oh, I'm invested in this. So maybe as a business resident, here's my contribution. I can come up with a program. Maybe as a librarian, I can donate time. Maybe as a citizen, I can go to a town hall meeting and ask questions about why isn't this in the budget? So the thing is, for me, from my perspective, I think there are things that every single person in the digital ecosystem, we all share a responsibility. So your responsibility might be storytelling, one responsibility might be getting educated, one might be doing research and getting statistics, some might be actually saying we're gonna be able to set aside resources, and resources don't have to be financial. Sometimes those resources are just a commitment. And so really thinking about how do we do that assessment, and once we do a really thorough assessment about where is there actually a loss, it makes it more exciting and promising to have conversations about funding. Because when I hear about, I get that question a lot, especially over the past 3 months, people will say, well, there's all of this funding coming out, whether it's Treasury, NTIA, FCC, you name it. There are actually a lot of federal agencies that have programs that people don't even know about. The problem is, if you aren't already making a plan, you are behind schedule. If you don't know where to start, you are behind. And what I worry about is that the people who have the resources, the communities that already have partnerships in place, they're gonna know where to get in line. They're gonna know how to file comments, they're gonna be able to meet grant deadlines, they're gonna be able to do a really quick turnaround. I remember we had to intervene in a proceeding in Iowa. They had 5 business days to respond to a grant proposal. The portal opened on Monday at 9 a.m., it closed at 5 p.m. on Friday. If you did not have a plan by the beginning of the week, you were already behind and locked out. So for me, it's really exciting when people say, oh, $10 million here, $30 million here, this is gonna be a great program. The problem that I have is that there are 10,000 municipalities in the United States, over 10. There are unincorporated areas. There are places that we don't talk about in Puerto Rico, Hawaii, some of the places that are part of the territories, US Virgin Islands. And I think all the time about how do we get to those people? And so my role in that sometimes is just trying to explain, here are your options, get involved. Whatever that is in the ecosystem. So there are gonna be people who are really good at funding, and that's gonna be great because this is gonna be a really good time for you to literally ramp up and say, here's our plan, here are the people that we need to work with, here's who's in charge of drafting. For other communities, literally, I remember a community, I show up in people's town hall meetings sometimes when I know they're doing digital equity plans, I'll just go. And I remember one of the town hall meetings, someone said before I got on stage, they were like, now, Francella, we're really glad you're here, but I'm gonna be honest with you. This is the first time we've said digital equity in our meeting. This was last year. I just wanna make sure people get that. This was 2020. So if in 2020, someone has to prep me that this is the first time we've said digital equity in a town hall meeting, and this might be difficult, then it's hard to have an authentic conversation if we are still litigating whether or not something is real. So that's what I'm trying to make real for people, that this is not a statistic, it is not somebody else's problem, it is not somebody else's house with dirty water. We are all invested in this because if my neighbor's child does not become an engineer or learn how to cure cancer, that has an effect on me too. So that's what I'm trying to empower.
That's that heat. All right, okay. So I think you already kind of answered on the third one, where I was gonna ask you the question about local communities applying pressure, but I think that there is already enough pressure in that statement, unless you want to allude to
Oh,
where...
no, there's more.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Where do local officials need to apply pressure? Well, there are a couple of things I think local officials need to do. Number one is to actually know their own community statistics. I go to too many places where I know their statistics better than they do. I'm not gonna show up in a place and I haven't studied your census numbers, your demographics, what's your median income. I mean, I think about that kind of stuff all the time. Because it's like, for example, here in Detroit, if you literally have a third of your population that is near the poverty line, you will always have problems with digital equity, full stop. This will be a perennial issue that surfaces in different ways, manifests itself with different tentacles because it's gonna affect other things. And so the thing is, we cannot separate the digital divide from poverty. because where you find one, you will find the other. And you can almost pinpoint it with precision. And so when we know that they are like inextricably tied, we have to have honest conversations about poverty too. Like, and it's not an either or, it's an and. Like, we have to have a conversation about both, because the issue is those households will always be at a disadvantage, and they will also be least equipped to advocate for themselves. So what do we need to do to share in that load, and to also acknowledge that when a household is disconnected, it is not only their loss, but we miss out on their genius. We miss out on their industry. We miss out on their ideas. And so when I say that, people are always like, well, I'm not sure. And it's like, there's no question mark. There is genius and brilliance in all of these households. But the thing is, some of them do not have the actual tools that they need to be able to capitalize on that. And so I just want to make sure that we're being really upfront about that. And then also, even at a local level, I think that so much, especially about Detroit in particular, Detroit is really special in the advocacy that happens here in a way that really just rarely happens in other cities. It's so storied and passionate, and I think the way that some of the residents treat issues, that they're so personal. And I think that for me, when I think about why like digital equity is personal, when we think about like when you traveled here to like drive on a road, right? That road is not something, we didn't debate whether or not you needed a street. We didn't debate who should pay for the street. We just agreed that we needed the street. It's going to be good for mail. It's going to be good because you can get to work. It's going to be great because kids can get their education. We agree on the baseline that it should be everywhere, right? There should be paved roads everywhere. And so when we think about should there be ubiquitous access, then it's like, yes, yes, yes. It should be everywhere. Because the truth is that as we become increasingly digitized, if we don't find a way to make it ubiquitous and affordable for people, then we're always going to have lots of people who are locked out. And so for local officials in particular, I want them to know their numbers. I want them to actually invest in it the way that they are asking other people to invest in it. I, as a nonprofit, do not ask companies to do things that I am not willing to do myself. So the thing is, when I ask a company to beef up your efforts on diversity, you better believe that in our organization, diversity is a part of every pipeline of our work, from who I hire for vendors. I don't care if I'm looking for a photographer or somebody to do graphic design. I am always thinking about that. That needs to be a part of every part of my business. So in the same way we are willing to make demands of business residents, we need to make sure our house is in order. So the thing is, it's like, are we like honoring those same commitments that we're asking other people to make in our own organizations? Also, when we think about the partnerships, I think that sometimes because of COVID, local officials entered into partnerships without reading all the fine print or asking as many questions as they should have. And I think that, quite frankly, it doesn't always have to be about, well, it's a difficult situation. I don't want to say anything because, and a lot of them feel like they have these political pressures. Like, I want to get reelected. I don't want to rock the boat. If you have a powerful mayor, you might have a less powerful town hall. There's like a city council. There are all these dynamics that are happening. So the thing is, I don't want to pretend that local governments don't have the same issues that maybe like state elected officials and federal elected officials have. But the truth is, they have to stand up for themselves. So that means that you can't just say, I want to know more. You literally, I don't care if it's a letter, have to show up in a docket. Because if you are not making your case on paper, then you don't get to argue that in person. And so that, for me, is one of those notes where it's like, as much as I'm not always excited about those protocols, because I think, quite frankly, it limits the amount of participation and feedback that you get, I acknowledge that that is the requirement. So we need to actually show up in those forums. So that means in your state proceedings, in your federal proceedings, and it doesn't have to be long to be meaningful. It just means that you have to show up. And then finally, I hope that every single local official finds out who's their state broadband officer or their state broadband resource. Because I go to too many places where people could not even name their state broadband officer. They couldn't even name them. Now, I do want to give a caveat. Back in 2000, you made a comment that alluded to this a little while ago. Back in like 2018-ish, 2019-ish, there were really only a handful back then. I'd say there were maybe 13 to 15 active state broadband offices. They might not have had a state broadband officer, but there was some sort of allotment from a state budget that actually said you had a state broadband office. Now you have closer to 30. So the thing is, this is something that, yes, it's new, but there is no excuse not to do the outreach. So if you do not hear from your state broadband officer, that means that you contact them. And so those are the types of little things that, you know, I don't make these demands for advocacy to say, oh, I think companies should do this and the agency should do this and this person should do this. I think we just all need to be accountable and make sure that whatever we're asking other people to do are the things we are willing to do ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is putting pressure on our state because we do not have an acting state
That's true.
point person. We have the office that was created this year. We still have yet to have a person running point there. So trust me, that is a fight that we're going to continue to have, and I'm glad you brought it up. All right, magic wand question. If you had a magic wand to alleviate only one pain point, what would that be and why? And one pain point as relates to the digital divide.
I think that the pain point would be that money could solve this problem. I am not convinced that that's what it is, because it doesn't matter how many millions or billions of dollars go out the door assigned to this specific issue. We will have to make that investment again and again and again. And part of the backdrop of that is that I want to make sure that our policies reflect our values. If we are truly saying that we think everyone deserves to be connected, our policies need to support that. And we need to let go of this idea that only digital inclusion can remedy it, because quite frankly, we're going to need ongoing support in a way that might look different a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We're going to have to make new investments that still address the deep-rooted issues of why we're here now. And so I don't, if I'm still going back to just one issue, I don't want to assume that some big one-time generational investment where everyone rallies around digital inclusion. This could be the year of broadband, as the governor of Wisconsin mentioned in 2021, but we're still going to need to do this again and again and again.
That's beautiful. Well, it's not beautiful, but it's beautiful the way that you're framing it. And one of the things that, you know, locally that we're looking at, which is why we prioritize within Connector and 3, a building operation. Because I remember before, and I was a stickler. I know people in media did not like me in the beginning when I first got here, but they would always say, no, and good luck with your project. And I'd stop, I'm like, projects have a defined start and a defined end. The digital divide doesn't have a defined end. So therefore, we need to build an operation that is set to run in perpetuity. And so the things that you're seeing within Connector and 3, that was intentionally built with that knowledge of knowing that we're not going to be able to project our way out of this and project manage the digital divide. It's not something that works that way. And that is something that's been a little bit difficult to get other people to realize, but again, not worried about that. The last question that we have for you, and obviously, you know, some folks can ask here, but the last question that I have for you, what can we, local communities do, and specifically Detroit, how can we help support next century cities? How can we help support the work that you all are already doing? Because again, you've already shown up, you're here, you're here today, and obviously people are really gelling with you because I hear the I hear it.
For right now.
It's picking up on the mic, I hear you all. But we're thankful for that. But again, how can we better support the efforts around next century cities?
Well, one thing is, you know, when I think about our work has to constantly evolve. And I think right now we're focused specifically on broadband access, like expanding broadband access and increasing adoption. So for us, we're very much thinking not only about the policies, how policies are made, who's invited into those rooms. We're constantly asking questions about that. Then on the adoption piece of it, we're thinking about, are connections affordable? Do people have devices? Do they have the tech support? And also not just digital literacy, not just digital literacy training, but really thinking about the community stewards and ambassadors who are essentially the people who are like the trusted messengers. Because when you think about, for example, in Latinx households nationwide, if you have a non-English speaking parent, you are less likely to have a broadband subscription and a computing device in your home. And I think that sometimes people forget that a lot of the people who they're measuring in these, in some of these surveys might have been leaving countries where they didn't trust government. So there might be literal surveillance issues why they don't want technology in their home. So we need to make sure that we have trusted messengers to be able to overcome those barriers, in the same way that we might also need to say, okay, we need to make sure this is available in different languages. We need to make sure that people reach out to communities with disabilities. We need to make sure that we're including people, not just in like handing out things at events and saying, did you hear about a program, but including them in ideation, right? And I think that, when I think about how we can support, and I think about how I support NCC, because as much as I lead NCC, I'm also a separate, researcher and do other things. I think all the time about making sure we have educated people in this conversation, and educated being community leaders, local officials, federal officials, state officials, agency reps. I want to make sure everybody does their homework, because I think too often I walk into a room and people tell me, you don't know how we do things. I admit, look, I worked on mortgage-backed securities and derivatives until 2017. I agree, this has not been something that I've always worked on, but it's not rocket science. I feel like if you study and you do your homework, you can have an authentic conversation that actually advances all of our goals. But if we always value tenure over ideas, if we always tell people about this is the way it's always been done, it's like, well then why do we keep having the same conversation? And maybe this is a good time for us to expand. So I think even trying to land on maybe something that specifically could help, I think that when people actually articulate what they need, for us to not treat it as an indictment. It's not an accusation, it's not blame or shame. It's just that this is where we are and this is what we need. And if we could do more listening in that mindset, I think we have a more constructive conversation, because then we don't have to treat those ideas as threats. We can treat them as something that's an opportunity for collaboration. And I think that, for me, you would be hard pressed to find me saying, for example, a company's name out loud in testimony, in a comment, in whatever. But I have companies that will send me email. I remember one company sent me emails and an email in all caps. He sent me an email in all caps because I said, for 5G, I said, they asked me a question on this panel, and they said, well, what about in this conversation, I don't hear you talking about 5G. And I said, well, quite frankly, sir, it was like, when I go to communities, they aren't asking me about 5G. And I said, and also if they don't have fiber, 5G is a remote possibility for them. It's gonna be a minute for them. And the company wrote me this email in all caps, how I was discouraging people from believing in 5G. This guy, it was so awful that his colleague sent an email to apologize. And and this happened last year, it was March. I want to just explain to people that you missed everything that I said. And you're so caught on trying to make sure we're sharing talking points about this. And it's like, again, if I were just talking to you, if I go home to Louisiana, I'm just talking to my neighbor, I'm talking to somebody I go to high school with, they don't care about broadband, or they don't care about what people are arguing about in Congress. They care about if they have an internet connection. They want their kid to be able to make more than $25,000 a year. That's what they care about. So I think sometimes it's I'm not sharing something to make it feel like it's shots fired, about me blowing holes in the way things have always been done. I think it's just a really good time for us to say, maybe this hasn't worked out and we need to try something else. And for us to try something else, that also means that maybe we can extend our arms and invite one more new person. It doesn't have to be everybody, but maybe you say, hey, those local officials actually have good ideas. And I'm a company, I know the commissioners like me. I'm gonna ask that commissioner, have you talked to any local officials about how this policy is gonna impact that city? Even asking is a big deal, because it creates an opportunity for someone to say, oh, we didn't include those community leaders, let's ask. And so that's the part where sometimes I think the little things we can do don't cost any money. I think sometimes it's just about us acknowledging that maybe this is a good time for new ideas, if this really is the season for digital equity?
Well, this is this is beautiful, and those are all the questions I have for you. But what I want to say, and I said this backstage to Francella too. I know keenly the folks who are sitting on all these national organizations, these public interest technology groups. I know them all. There's not like an infinite amount of them, and in my opinion, Francella is unrivaled. I talk to these folks, I see what they're producing, and the thing that Francella is really getting at, she's not really looking at the moment and saying, this is where I stop. This is a moment that I'll acknowledge, but we can't lose sight and go off course by getting seduced by easy wins. And so, Francella, I thank you for the way that you've been working. And again, in Detroit, we're supporting you all nationally as you're accomplishing what many people, quite frankly, thought 10 years ago, even 5, maybe 2, was impossible. To have the amount of funding that's within that rescue plan, impossible. To see the Treasury actually change what they meant around broadband access and how that money gets spent, that was deemed impossible before. There's so much of a world of possibility molded out of what we thought was impossible, and you're on the front line of that, and we're thankful for your leadership. And so I don't want to essentially drag this out too much longer, but again, we're appreciative for you coming by, stopping by, dropping the wisdom. For folks in the audience and for folks who are watching virtually, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Warren. Yeah, you're going to talk to him. Before we, move on to the next part of this program, does anyone have any questions? I think we could do this in a way where, or any feedback or anything. If not, I think they can just shout. Great. Okay. So again, thank you everybody for this one. We'll move on.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Man, I want to take her home, like have her sit down with my boys. She is fantastic. So we're going to move on next to our forum, Data in Action. So I'm going to ask Warren Flood to come to the stage. Warren and I used to work together, another smart brother in the room. And Noah Urban to also come to the stage.
All right. Well, welcome to Connect 3 and 3 on the air. Francella has been amazing, and I think that what we're going to see here as we talk about data, that's been one of the conversations that not a lot of people have been having in the way that they need to be having it. A lot of times, and again, Francella alluded to us mentioning these statistics, and I agree, a lot of local leaders do not know their stuff, they don't know their statistics. I happen to know bad data. And what I mean by that, a lot of our data that we've used to frame the digital divide, specifically looking at the American Community Survey, a lot of that data is problematic if we only rely on that to frame the issue. And so as part of the rescue plan, this administration locally, we're prioritizing data collection in a way where it allows us to actually answer the question, are we winning? No, I can point to some of our American Community Survey numbers over the years and say, well, Detroit, you're having more people use the internet. Okay, sure. But it doesn't really get to the root of the issue, and no one's really able to say, well, why don't we have the thing that we want? Everyone keeps saying we need better maps, but do we? It's not that. What do we need? And so this is really our way, this conversation today, to help right-size the issue and help us put us on a course of data empowerment at the intersection of the digital divide, where we're going to be able to know in a way where we haven't historically known the data on the ground and how that data can be leveraged to actually change political outcomes. And so next to me, you have, again, Noah Urban, you have Warren Flood. These people are incredible. I love the way that they work. So to the both of you, if you could just say, one, who are you and what do you do? You first, Noah.
Thank you. So my name is Noah Urban. I am the co-executive director of Data Driven Detroit, and we are the community data hub for Detroit and the metropolitan region.
And I'm Warren Flood. I am a program manager at Microsoft, working on digital inclusion and U.S. community engagement on the skills for jobs and livelihoods team.
Wonderful. And the first question for the both of you, how did you get involved in this work? And what does data mean to you? You don't have to go first every time. You're just sitting next to me. It makes it seem like you have to go first every time.
No worries. Yeah, so I'll start with the second part first, actually. Because at D3, so we're a mission-driven organization. We exist to provide accessible, high-quality information and analysis to drive informed decision-making. But what that really means when you distill it down is that we exist to kind of bridge the information divide that tends to exist in pretty much any city or region that you go into, and we exist to do that for Detroit. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of data that's out there in the world, but it's really difficult if you're not a large corporation or an organization that has a lot of resources for you to actually access and make meaning from it, and that's what we exist to do for our community. We exist to help organizations that may not be able to have a data analyst on staff or may not be able to get access to the same kind of information as a Fortune 500 company to be able to get access to data so that they can use it to drive their decisions and then to level the playing field too, so that they can kind of participate in these conversations with a lot of other organizations. And that's something that speaks really strongly to me because data is out there in the world right now. I mean, it's here, people are using it, people are using it to drive their decisions, they're gaining benefit from it, and if not everybody has access to that, that's a really big equity problem, and we exist to kind of try and operate in that space and help reduce that problem. So that was what really attracted me to this work. And then for Connect 313 specifically, we started working to try and build this data, essentially a data infrastructure that could support the initiative and answer a lot of the questions that, as Josh mentioned, really don't have good answers from the available data. Like there's not a lot of good information available about the digital inclusion ecosystem, and so how can we get more of that information available, especially so that actors who generally don't have as much power or influence in regular conversations can use it as well?
I came to Detroit, I guess 3 years ago, and my first week here, my colleague who oversaw, was a technical lead on the national civic tech work that Microsoft was doing. He was out here in Detroit, and he immediately took me to a whiteboard, and he mapped out the importance of having a data alliance, a regional data alliance in each of these markets if we're trying to have an impact on the work that we're doing. Then he took me to Data Driven Detroit. I met Erica, I met Noah and the team, quickly fell in love and realized that I wanted to spend all my time working with them, and was looking for excuses or touch points in order to help empower them in the work that they were doing. My first month here, I met Josh. Josh came into town at the same time, and I spent the entire first year telling Josh that I didn't have anything to do with digital inclusion. Once people were digitally included, that's when Microsoft and we could step in and then actually help with the skilling. But what Josh made me realize was that every single thing that Microsoft does is digital inclusion. When you look at anything from healthcare, right, not having access to being able to get online and having the comfort level of sharing your health situation with a health practitioner impacts health outcomes. When you think of employment, we often think about jobs and tech jobs when it comes to coding, but there are so many jobs now that are affected and impacted. You have to have a comfort level of technology just to be able to keep up. And when you think of even things such as just being able to talk and call a friend, it helps with mental health. And I didn't realize or think through that lens, racial justice and social justice was two other issues where I had thought of as sort of being independent, but when you have a disparity of information between one side and the other, you're going to create these inequities that technology and data and companies can help. So Josh really helped me see how all of the work that Microsoft was wanting to do in order to have an impact on people's lives was actually a manifestation or a subset of digital inclusion, equity, empowerment. And then the thing that as has been the theme as when all the people who've been doing work in this space have been coming together saying, how can we help, how can we help? The first thing that Josh mentioned was we need better data. That's to Francella's point, right? You need to know your numbers on the ground in order to be able to drive impact and policy. And that was when I popped my head up and went like, oh, that is something that I can help out with a little bit more. And that's how I sort of came to join Noah and Josh in their efforts to empower Detroit, particularly leaning in on what can we do with data that can really connect communities to the work that we're trying to impact through addressing the multiple digital divides.
Multiple digital divides. Yeah, I picked up on that. Slick. All right. Staying on you, Warren, and this is the same question to you too, but Warren, describe your biggest data win.
Personally or in the city?
No,
or?
personally. What's your biggest data win?
Well, I used to describe it as in 2009, 2010, I had the fortune of serving in the White House. I was Vice President Biden's technology director. And I was close to the work that was being done at the time around the Recovery Act, the first Recovery Act, the American Recovery Act of 2009, 2010. Back then, we were bickering over how to invest $780 to $870 billion. I used to keep on saying million, and the team would correct me every time they say billion, because my brain just couldn't wrap our head around it. But we were afraid to say the T word, trillion, because we thought there was no way that was going to get bipartisan support. Fast forward to what we saw, the dual pandemics with unemployment and COVID, and it really highlighted that we were even thinking way too small back then. So as I was data lead for the White House Oversight Office for the Recovery Act, back then, that up to that point was my proudest moment. The fact that we didn't hear a story or about a big scandal about money being misspent or what have you, I really do credit to then Vice President Biden's leadership in the office. And so I saw the power that data could have in really helping when policy is written and there are large line items of budget, how does it actually reach the sub-awardee who's on the front lines, who's in your neighborhoods, in the communities, serving the people who we're trying to address. Data is a thing that when that flows can really help coordinate and allocate those scarce resources optimally. And so I saw the power of that then. That used to be my proudest moment. This is now my proudest moment because back then I was still far removed from the work as opposed to here in Detroit, seeing just the impact of the work of the communities coming together, of all the different stakeholders across all of the different sectors has been absolutely remarkable. And it has really shown that we can engage civically and the role that government can play in empowering public sector, other entities of the public sector, private sector, nonprofits, as mentioned earlier, academia, philanthropy, but most importantly, led by and for community. And so I really feel that the work here being done in the rallying cry around digital inclusion is not only great for digital inclusion, but is also helping to address some of those other social issues that challenge us to this day. Back again to Francella, I'm probably just gonna say Francella this entire time, but back to Francella's point about how you need to absolutely address the digital divide, but it's part of every other conversation. I'm most proud about the work that we're doing now and being able to play a small role in it because I see that not only are we hoping to close those multiple digital divides, but we're also helping to build the community and organizational muscle and operation in order to do this work across a whole set of other social issues.
Yeah, and I think for me, so this answer might come across a little bit trite at first, but it's basically whenever somebody actually uses the data that we provide to do something. Like, it's really easy to create data and just throw it out into the world. That's kind of how we've gotten into our existing data situation right now. But like when someone actually connects that data that we've provided to action and says like, this helped me make this change in my community, that's the most effective. I think there was just one moment a few months ago where we were doing a training for one of our online data tools, and a community development organization said, okay, I got more information that I can use in 5 minutes of using this tool than 2 interns over 2 summers were able to provide for me. So that kind of story and those kinds of situations, those are the ones that I really am proud of.
Absolutely, absolutely, okay. All right, common misconception. What are common data misconceptions organizations and ecosystems routinely make? Now, I said it in a way where you don't have to point at Detroit organizations specifically, just organizations in general. What are some of those common data misconceptions that they make? City included.
I can think of 2. Well, I'll stick to 2. The first one is that more data is better, which is not always the case. And this sounds really weird coming from somebody who works for a data shop, but again, there's so much information out there in the world today that it's really easy for it to get overwhelming. And what that means too is that everybody you're collecting that information from also gets overwhelmed. And so if you're asking, especially if you're asking people for information, but even if you're just collecting other information, it's really important to be, selective and thoughtful in how you're engaging people, because anytime somebody responds to a survey, anytime, they answer the phone when you call them or respond to an online link that you send them. You're getting information from people, and they're devoting their time and their resources, and if they don't see tangible benefit, then they'll stop participating. So making sure that you're being thoughtful about how you're interacting and collecting data from people, and then also making sure that you're just being respectful of their time and connecting their actions to actual visible outcomes they can see, that's really important. The second one that I've seen a lot happen is thinking of data necessarily as sort of like a project as opposed to more of like an infrastructure type situation. Everyone always wants to see like the fancy online data tool and like the numbers that they can, collect and just pull down really easily. But what a lot of people don't realize is that to use a very tired analogy, it's the tip of the iceberg. You see like this little tiny iceberg, and then underneath there's this massive amount of data infrastructure that actually makes that little tiny forward-facing website possible. And everyone wants to focus on that forward-facing part, but really it's impossible for that to function effectively without everything underneath also running smoothly and efficiently.
So I'll stick with two. But one is, I think a common misconception is that data removes agency or your ability to make decisions. I think oftentimes folks think that, once we have the data, that will make the decisions for us. And so there is two things that happen. Number one is folks wrongfully assume that if they have a bit of data or some understanding or interpretation of that data, that must be the right decision, and they remove the other thought process from it. And then the other part that happens is so folks assume that, well, this is no longer my problem, someone else over there is going to solve it once we have the data. And the other part then of course is you then feel removed or just from the decision making itself, where you have local context, you know already which communities, and that's something that we ran into here in Detroit. Folks were like, where's the data, where's the data? Like, we already know where the data is. Just go ask Brilliant Detroit, they're already there. Just go ask Focus Hope, they're already in their neighborhoods. Ask Matrix Solutions, right? So in thinking of data as being the thing that makes the decisions, and instead of, well, how does it empower the decision makers while they're thinking through all the other things that need to be taken into consideration. When I worked on when I worked in political campaigns, we used to say that it was our job as the data folks to represent data 100%, knowing that it was only 25% of the overall decision making. So even if the data seemed to have reflect a choice to make investments or to go one way versus the other, we knew that wasn't a right or wrong answer. It was a matter of, well, this is just more information as you're thinking through, and there are different ways to address the issue. So number one is thinking that data and spreadsheet's gonna like solve or answer the problem. And sometimes we stop because we're like, well, we don't have the data, so we don't even bother moving forward. And that's sort of the second part that I learned the hard way, was that you don't need to have the perfect data set, you just need to have good enough data to be able to move forward. That's better than anything else that you have previously. And that's usually a very low bar when it comes to social impact work. There usually isn't that much data out there. So just having a good enough data set, just taking the data that you do have, you're able to move forward with, and it will improve over time. And that's something, again, harkening back to my time with the first recovery effort, Ed DeSev, who ran the office, that was a phrase that he repeated to me again and again to where it's been ingrained in my head, which is you don't need to have perfect data, you need to have good enough data that's better than what's already out there, and you move forward with that, and over time it'll improve. And that's what I'm seeing here in Detroit and also across the nation. In other markets that are starting to really dig into this work on a way that goes beyond just the publicly available American Community Surveys or census data.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask you maybe a doozy question then, because this wasn't on here. And Noah, feel free, but Warren set up this alley-oop. On the data side, because the next question was really looking at some of the limitations and some of the common misconceptions that we rely on from a data standpoint as relates to the digital divide. We kind of already addressed that at the onset, that we're relying on the American Community Survey, and us being solely reliant on that. One, that data is aggregate at the census level. Well, our communities live at the household level. People live at their streets. They know that stuff personally, not the whatever 51114 whatever. So it's like, no, that's not where people live.
Noah has them all memorized. You can just ask him.
Definitely does.
I do.
So it's like, again, the limitation on the census part. And then in addition to that, the data lag itself, as well as it being a rolling average on how that data is collected. So it doesn't really give us a real point on what our actual digital divide looks like in Detroit. That is a very pervasive statement to make because we've been relying on these numbers. But again, that has been the standard. And so what do you say to communities who are reliant on American Community Survey data? What do you say to them to get them and ushering them into a new way of thinking about data collection for the digital divide? And the reason why I'm making that general on communities, because obviously this conversation is happening in Detroit. But the problem is, in Detroit, we can't be the only ones to get it right. Because if we're the only ones who get it right, what does that get us? We need a coalition of people across the country, municipalities, who are thinking in the same way as relates to data. So what would you say to usher in that paradigm shift of thinking differently and better around digital equity data?
All right, I guess I'm taking that one first. So, yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, like going back to Warren's point about, data is never perfect. It's really important to acknowledge that with any numbers that you're presenting out into the world. Nothing is going to be perfect, and you just want to try and get the best information you can with what's available. And so you're right, we have been using the American Community Survey, and D3, we actually continue to use it in some of our partnerships because it's really the only source of data that's available for some of those sources, or some of the key points like median household income, the digital inclusion data that we've been referencing for this initiative. Really, ACS is all that's there right now. That doesn't mean it's the only thing that can be there forever, though, and I think it's sort of almost like an incremental approach where you have to show people that things can be different before they can actually really see how it's going to affect them. And I'll just use an example from some of the work we've done in housing, where we used to rely on a lot of American Community Survey data as well. We recently have been able to get much more accurate property level data, much more up to date, and we built this fancy data system, and we at D3 actually don't even fully know how to use it yet. So we'll just get like a question from a reporter that's like, hey, can you answer, say how many blight tickets happened on properties that after they were sold to speculators or something. We'd be like, oh, we couldn't have before, but now we can, and now we know that we can, and now that we can show other people that we can. And it sort of starts this rolling conversation where as you have these more powerful data tools and information available, you can actually start to ask questions that you never even would have thought were possible. And the community engagement and the engagement with nonprofits and practitioners is really important as a part of that, because they're the people who are on the ground. We're just the data stewards. They're the ones who actually know the questions that they need answered. And so we try to keep in touch with people very regularly to just try and understand, what other questions are you having? Hey, we can actually maybe solve this. And then that builds, and that more reliable data system starts to accrete itself over time.
And this is actually creates an opportunity. So I'll speak a little bit tactically about how we are addressing the issue of the fact that data, even though it's the best data that's currently out there for us to use, there is that time lag, and the fact that it might be removed from the work and the interventions that are happening at the household and at the individual level with residents. So thing number one is we're making decisions based on the best data set that we have. And everyone wants to have a map, right? Because when it comes to data, show me a map, and they want to see that heat map. But that heat map right now that folks are using, or indices that they're putting together, tend to be based on this American Community Survey's data. It's a rolling 5-year average. And what that means is the data set that we are using for 2019 has results from 2013 through 2018. So folks are saying, hey, today in October 2021, how are we making decisions of where we're going to make digital inclusion investments? We're referring to data that could be as old as 2013. So the way that but now from a federal or a national point of view, they don't have the ability in order to really delve into that data. We in the cities here do. So what we're doing is we take that baseline, and it's an incredible baseline. It's the best baseline that we have. It does get down. It breaks the city into about 880. You can think of it just approximate 900 squares, a 30 by 30 grid over Detroit of equal shape and size. So it's a really good baseline to start, right? It's really good data to start with. But what's happening today, right now, 2021, well, we need to have a current snapshot of what's happening. That's where polling can come into place, and basic polling. So even though the data that showed us in 2019 that the digital inclusion divide in Detroit was around 49.2%, the way that we choose to measure it, when you do that same type of polling today, that number is up to around 67.5%. So we can now take all of that really good granular data that pulls in all those other demographics that Francella again mentioned earlier that we need to know. What's our median household income? What are all the different ways we can slice it? To Noah's point, to be able to answer questions that we don't even know are being asked yet, we can take that baseline data and then just raise all of the scores to the point to where we know where it's at today. So we're no longer just looking at the number that it gave us for the end of 2018, but we're looking at all of that really good data, but calibrated to our current snapshot based on top line polling. It's amazing at how effective polling, simple polling can be, right? It's also can be wrong and where it matters, for example, in elections, 2 or 3% might make a big difference. But when it comes to digital inclusion work, we're not gonna treat a neighborhood that has 87% device rate differently than we treat a neighborhood that has 84% device rate. So we don't need that same level of precision. This polling comes really, really helpful where we can speak to a couple thousand Detroiters and get a really, really good sense as to the situation for all 660,000 Detroiters when done properly. The third thing that we as a city have that the national data folks at Census don't have, which is why it's on us here in the cities to be able to do this work at the granular level, is we know the interventions that we're making. We know the investments that are coming through. We know exactly where we are putting in devices, where we are helping to assist with internet, where we are coming in with digital literacy, technical support, very important part of technical support, that is often overlooked in the conversation when it just gets framed as devices, connectivity, and digital literacy. But we know where these interventions are happening, so we can in real time adjust our data and our scores and our understanding of what's happening based on not only the historic data that sets a really good baseline, adjusted for our current snapshot from our top line polling, but then also continue to adjust it based on the interventions that we are making and the investments that we are making. So that way the next $10,000, $100,000 that comes through the door, we'll know exactly where that will have the best impact based on the most recent snapshot. And that's something that only cities can do, which is why I'm so excited about being able to do this work. I'm here with Data Driven Detroit, Noah and his team, and with Joshua Edmonds, because really, this is where the pavement hits where the rubber hits the road. And as Josh was saying, it doesn't make sense if we only do it here in Detroit. The impact of the work that we're doing here in Detroit can also help as we work with our counterparts in other cities. We are where the real power in order to address the digital divides and where to make these investments come from. So just being able to work in Detroit to really get deep and understand it, and then to work with counterparts in other cities, I think is gonna have a huge impact that the current landscape of just relying on this older national data sets in order to make these decisions just doesn't make any sense.
Well, one, I love the framing here, and I think that this is my last question to you, to the both of you. What data ask do you have for the Detroit ecosystem, and what does that get us? So if you're going to articulate X, what are we getting by doing that?
I'll start because you get the get. So I'll do the ask because this is actually a demand on Noah as well. And the ask is we too often, as Josh mentioned earlier, think of data as a project and not as a way of life, right? I just imagine Noah with like data life, tattooed on his belly. But it's true, right? So like what I would ask is for anyone who's doing the work, either making the investments and more specifically the funders coming, whether it's public sector, private sector, philanthropic, whoever's doing the funding, please bake in a certain percentage to be able to increase your data capacity, to collect the data that's needed, to feed into this data ecosystem, and then to be able to use the results. No longer can we think about data as simply impact reporting after the fact, where we invest in the nonprofits and then we hound them, talking as a funder, full disclosure, and we hound them afterwards for these quarterly and semi-annual reports, instead of empowering them at the beginning and saying, instead of giving you just 50, we're gonna give you 60. What's that extra 10 for? We want you to be able to increase your data capacity. If you don't have the ability to do that internally right now, that's where our friends at Data Driven Detroit are perfectly set up in order to help you increase your data capacity, in order to do the work in these nonprofits. So as funders, to weave and bake in capacity and funding specifically to help these organizations collect and then use data in a more effective and efficient way. What does that get us?
It gets us into a regional data utility. You can tell Warren and I have probably worked on this a little bit from time to time. But generally, I mean, in answering this, I would take Warren's response and even expand on it a little bit to say it's really about changing how we think about data from like a project to this sort of like data utility and this data infrastructure, where it's like if someone's trying to turn on a light bulb, you don't just, every time you're trying to turn on a light bulb, call up a solar power company, be like, okay, I need my solar panel installed here, I need it plugged in, hooked up and everything. Like you just turn on the light bulb and the electricity is there. It should be something similar with data but in the past, how most data projects get funded is they're just that, they're projects. The funding comes in to complete the data project, to answer the question, and then it goes away. And if we really want to be able to have a data ecosystem that can be transformative, that can answer those questions that can't be answered, it needs to be systemic, it needs to be around for a very long time, and it needs to be able to work not just with funders, but also with the community, so that it can be responsive to their needs, with other organizations, so that it can get access to data to answer questions that may not be able to be answered through conventional public data sources. And then it also needs to be responsibly stewarded so that people can feel comfortable contributing their data into that sort of an environment, so that there's oversight and accountability. And all of those things, I mean, if it sounds like how our local utility companies operate or should operate, there's a reason for that. And so that's what we're really trying to see in long term, is a shift from not just data as something that can answer one or two questions when people have one or two questions, but data as a community resource that can answer questions that we might not even think to ask now, but we might try to ask in the future.
And I promise this is the last time I'll say this. Like Francella listed earlier, it's not a matter of just 2021, making 2021 the year of digital inclusion, whether it's broadband, connectivity, devices, digital literacy, but we're gonna need to address this year in again and again and again. However, this is a moment in time. We do have this influx of investment. How we spend and use that investment will determine, are we putting it into something like a data utility that is sustainable over time, that will help us address not only our immediate questions, but questions for the future? Or are we just simply going to invest it directly into thinking that, well, we got someone a device, we got them internet connectivity for 3 months, problem solved, we can move on. So what we really are asking here is that as we're coming together, as all these organizations are asking, how can we do more, how can we lean in, we're asking to please think of data life as a way of life. Embed that into your practices when it comes to funding, as well as when the folks who are on the front lines doing the execution. Data Driven Detroit is here to help, and Connect 313 as an ecosystem will make really good use of this data, not only to optimally allocate scarce resources when we are helping to advise where these investments go, but also setting the stage for a data utility that can be used in perpetuity, not only for digital inclusion, but for other issues as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, first and foremost, a round of applause to both Warren and Noah. They've been showing up in ways, again, that even as they're talking in a very humble way on this stage, they've been involved in a lot of different things. When I first came to Detroit, even before I got to meet Warren, I did get to sit down with Data Driven Detroit and just having the conversation with them about data. I was asking them about everything because, for some of you folks who've been in close proximity with Mayor Duggan, he's a numbers guy, a results guy. And the more I kept stressing that, Mayor, I can't answer those questions, the more frustrated he was getting with me. And so that frustration then, I took that bucket of frustration and then put it in front of Data Driven Detroit and said, help me figure this out. And they were honestly really instrumental in helping us get around the way that we were thinking, and obviously get out of our own head a little bit. And so again, I thank you all, Noah specifically, for showing up there. And obviously on Warren's front, I talked to Warren probably, I think I talk to you every day. And honestly, very similar to Francella, when I first got that congressional hearing call, I called Warren and I'm like, help, I don't know what I'm doing. I am literally scared out of my mind. These people are gonna eat me alive up there. I don't know what I'm doing. Why did they pick me, and blah, blah, blah. I was on the phone with Warren, I believe it was, I got the call Friday, and I think I was on the phone with Warren on Saturday till like 2 or 3 in the morning. And just he was helping calm me down, like, no, I've been here before, I know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And what Warren did, he got Microsoft's data team on the phone. I referenced Microsoft's data in my congressional hearing. If you're looking at it, again, this is gonna live in the Library of Congress forever, presumably. I was the only person who referenced Microsoft's data up there. And now, fast forward to what you see now with some of Microsoft's efforts, they're focusing on data. They're focusing on the digital divide broadly in both rural and urban markets. Everything that we do here is interconnected. And so this conversation that we're having today it's really rooted in a history of folks showing up, namely these two, in ways that are just incredible, that are not common. And as we move forward, I think that they're going to continue doing that because that's what it's going to take, but not just for Detroit, for a litany of other markets where we can actually significantly move the needle and address some of these larger political challenges that, again, a few years ago were impossible to address. So I just want to publicly thank both of you for the way that you all have helped us in changing our thinking on the topic, and will continue to change our thinking on the topic, as well as building an infrastructure that's going to allow us to answer questions that, quite frankly, we're just not smart enough to ask yet. So thank you again for you all being here today. Now it's on. All right. So we're going to resume. Thank you for the lunch. I didn't really get to eat it, but the lemonade does taste pretty good. That being said, this is, as we transition to Detroit is Limitless, this is an Emmy award-winning documentary. And I'm not joking when we say Emmy award-winning, because sometimes people say that. No, this is legitimately it. 2020 took a lot from us. And in 2020, that's when Detroit is Limitless, they were recognized, that's when they received that Emmy. But unfortunately, with all the things that were going on with COVID, somehow that got lost in the mix. And what we felt was absolutely necessary is we talk about the digital divide. We break it down, obviously, on devices, internet access, technical support, digital literacy, but storytelling is a critical component of that. And if we're not doing storytelling at a level that is necessary for us to bridge the digital divide, or at the very least, draw attention to not only the folks who are on the wrong side of the digital divide, but on folks who are getting it right, on folks who've been able to get on the right side of the digital divide and to be able to reach back. There is something there, there's merit there. And so I have a huge thanks to Robin Schwartz, who was the person who actually ran point on creating Detroit is Limitless. She's here today, and when we do the screening, you're gonna see her passion shine through on the stage. But right now, I wanna invite Robin to the stage to really just give a few words on what is Detroit is Limitless? What does that mean? And how do you view this today? What does this mean for you today to be able to do that? What was the process? And so again, just give a few words about Detroit is Limitless. Okay, Warren, thank you.
So when I was looking into moving to Detroit, I of course did my research. Coming from a community organizing, community engagement background, I married a community organizer. I realized just how important it is to move people to action through properly telling their story. And to say that when I came across Robin's work, I was moved to tears, to laughter, to joy, all within these 3-minute bite-sized sections. I knew that she was the perfect person who was telling the story about Detroit to me as an outsider, and really made me feel passionate in why I care so much about this work. And so I was looking for excuses to work with Robin, and thankfully the opportunity came about, which is where Detroit is Limitless came from. And as Josh said, you give Robin a little bit of resources and let her work her magic, and it's incredible what folks can do. So I'm just really grateful for your partnership and leadership in this space.
Thank you so much. That's an introduction that brings laughter, tears. Much appreciated. You know, when Warren came to us with this project and this idea, this was like a dream come true. I spent 17 years as a reporter in the city of Detroit, covering a wide variety of things, anything from crime to car accidents to, politics. And it's the untold stories like this story that I am most passionate about. These are the things that people don't get a chance to see. And I haven't seen a story like this told about Detroit. So to be given access to things going on behind the scenes with Microsoft, with Grow Detroit's Young Talent, with all of these talented, incredible students that we met, it was inspiring to me, and I hope that it will be inspiring to you to hear and see from them right now. And, sorry, I want to shout out Grayson Barris, who is the videographer that captured all the footage that you're about to see. He's incredible, and I would not be able to do what I do without him. Enjoy.
We live in a high-tech world.
Everywhere we look, technology is taking over.
We're walking around with computers in our pocket. You know, everything that we use is computerized now. Detroit is now becoming the next Silicon Valley. We have approximately 400,000 jobs that'll be available in the technology fields by 2022. But we only have about 40% of the workforce to fill those jobs. Well, I want our city, our people, to be the people to fill those jobs, especially within our own city.
We are getting companies come back to this town almost every week. Microsoft moved in here from the suburbs.
Detroit has tremendous potential, and I put all of my trust in young folks.
You will be the future of Detroit. You will make Detroit what we are destined to be, which is the best.
Detroit is limitless because of its people. Detroiters are some of the most resilient people, hardworking, hustlers.
Detroit is limitless because there are infinite opportunities.
Detroit is limitless because of students like me.
Take your seats real quickly. We are about to begin. Good morning and congratulations to the class of 2019. We salute you today as future leaders of tomorrow.
I want to congratulate you this morning on becoming a positive statistic in the city of Detroit. You are now a high school graduate, and that is worthy of applause.
My name is Jovan Arnold. I live in Detroit all my life. I'm 16 years old, and I attended Westside Academy. This year, I graduated at the age of 16.
On graduation day was a very special day, for not only me, for my family members, to see me walk across stage.
Jovan Arnold.
Seeing him actually walk across that stage was like, oh my God, like you made it. Like you did it, and you did it early. Seeing him walk across that stage was just like the first step that he's gonna take into the world.
Your Westside Academy 2019 graduating class.
Joey's quiet. Joey's very quiet, very to himself. He's always been fascinated with computers since young. Anything dealing with computers, video games, he's on it. He catches on really quick when it comes to the technology. It's just in him, it's like he's drawn to it. I'm very proud, extremely proud.
While I was in school, I self-taught myself how to code.
Coding is telling the machine to do something. One of my favorite programming languages is this thing called CICS. And even anybody in mainframe will know this. But one of my first assignments was the ATM machine. Well, I was able to write code behind the ATM machine so that you could get money out of the machine. To say, you put your card in, there's code that recognizes you. If your PIN number is incorrect, it comes up and says incorrect PIN. That is not magic. That is a piece of code. If you want to get $100 out of the machine and you have two, there's a piece of code that says, yeah, no, that's not going to happen today.
You wrote this. Did they have that block format?
We're here in the computer lab. This is where I started my coding experience.
We have this challenge going.
I was a part of the TILS program, and my teacher was Judy Dent.
I could win this time. I got first this time.
I learned some stuff about computers before the TILS program, but the TILS helped me expand my knowledge.
TEAL stands for Technology Education and Literacy in Schools. We build and grow computer science programs by building a teaching team of volunteers and teachers. One of the biggest needs in computer science in Michigan right now are teachers. In 2016, there were only 6 new teachers trained in the entire state of Michigan to teach computer science. So TEALS started actually in 2009. We had a computer science teacher. He was working with schools to kind of help them teach computer science. Well, he got a job at Microsoft, and he started to realize that his team in general didn't really do a lot of collaborative work until about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And he felt like he could still help that first hour of the school day on his way to work. So he got permission, and he was able to actually drop in out of school and actually teach their computer science class on his way to work and still get a full day in every day. Next thing you know, 12 of his buddies were all across Seattle teaching computer science. So he quit Microsoft and started a nonprofit called TEALS. Within that first year of him running that nonprofit, he got approached by Satya Nadella, who is now the Microsoft CEO. He wasn't at the time, but now he is. He says, we want to help you grow TEALS as fast as possible, and we want to completely fund you. So that's how TEALS came in to Microsoft. And so fast forward to today, we're in over 600 high schools across the country. We're in about 40 schools across the state, primarily Southeast Michigan, in the Metro Detroit area, the 3 counties, Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne. Westside Academy was one of the first schools that came on. It was really great to be able to help their school just envision what computer science is, have an understanding of how it can affect their school and how it can give opportunities to their students. So we started working with Judy Dent there at the school. She was great.
This is a lot of code.
Yeah, I did
You
it.
see all this code over here? Initially, I wasn't able to recruit students, but this year, I'm recruiting students. Please excuse me 1 second. You all have to step out of the room, please, and close the door. You see, I am a teacher.
My teacher had told me to get into Python and other coding languages, and I just got hooked onto it.
In the fall, I asked him to join our coding class. He jumped right into Snap. He was moving ahead of the class. He was 3 assignments ahead, 5 assignments ahead. I said, oh my goodness, what do we have going here? So we decided to unleash Python in the class, and Jovel was one of those people that embraced it.
I kind of got it on the first day, like the first day of trying it. It was kind of easy, print statements, variables. It was just simple stuff to me. I do want to become a software developer.
He can use that ability, that talent, to excel and to advance in life. If he chooses to do so, he has a lot to give back to the world. He can be the next great transformative genius in the world, and I would love to see that. I'd love to help catalyze that.
You gotta open it, you gotta close it with precision.
Oh, I definitely see him in the IT field. I see him as a leader. I really see him out engaging in the marketplace. He's really a people person as well as a technical person. It's really been an exciting journey to expose them to an area that just has so many opportunities, and really there's a shortage of people. I was in IT 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and they had just invented the PC, and we just couldn't visualize that it was going this way, and no one really was coming into our circle that gave us an idea that everyone was going to have a PC.
When I just think of just Michigan alone, in Detroit and Ann Arbor, the hiring is unreal. All the companies I talk to, I keep hearing 300 people in 3 years, right? Like they need software developers. There's just a huge need for that in Michigan and nationally. In Michigan alone, Within the next 5 years, there'll be 270,000 open IT and computing jobs. And we only graduated 2,000 computer science graduates last year in the entire state of Michigan. So that's a huge gap that we have to try to fill.
Where do we put it?
And forever.
Okay, we put it under show number.
And then you put input.
Jovel is a prime example of our program putting that spark inside of a student and that excitement for them to learn computer science and be able to get in and have an internship at Microsoft. Like how often does that get to happen for a kid in Detroit?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am super excited that you guys are here today. We have a lot of information to cover.
We're going to send it down this cord into there.
A few months ago, we were at Microsoft's offices in downtown Detroit at a minority student day.
How many people in here play Fortnite? Okay, I figured. There was somebody that had to sit on a computer and code that game to work.
There was about 100 to 150 students coming by to learn about the technology. I think the idea was to expose kids or younger adults to technologies and jobs in the technology fields. And a teacher mentioned that they have a special students that they would like us to meet. And this is where we met Jovel.
Use your finger and cover the light level.
Ooh, whoa.
We basically gave him a brain pad, which is a small circuit that's used for teaching kids, exciting kids about technology and coding. So he started with the brain pad and quickly picked it up and understood what needs to be done by himself in a few minutes. So somebody brought up the idea that why don't we have Jovel run the class himself? And he did.
This is the brain pad right here. Think of it as like a miniature computer or an imitation of a computer.
That is so cool.
He was offered internship at Microsoft that day.
One of his teachers was telling me how intense he was and how much he really loved computers, and he was studying and learning things on his own, learning to program on his own. And I said, well, that sounds familiar, because I taught myself. I'm a software architect, born and raised in Detroit, grew up in Detroit, spent lots of time on these streets out here. When I was 12 years old, my dad and I were at Radio Shack. You remember them? And Dad was buying batteries. And I saw a book on programming microcomputers, and I thought, oh, this looks pretty cool. And I asked my father to buy the book for me, and he did. And I took it home and I read it cover to cover, and I started writing programs out on paper because there was just no way we were going to afford a computer at home. We just couldn't afford one. They were way too expensive. And I learned how to program in languages like C and Assembler and Algol and a whole bunch of these other languages without ever touching a computer. And that just kind of got me hooked.
Whether you know it or not, whatever your passion is, guaranteed there's some level of technology, and the sooner that you recognize that, the quicker you'll be able to tap into it. One saying that I love is creativity is evenly distributed throughout every zip code, opportunity isn't. We knew we wanted to figure out a way to engage young students. The city of Detroit has this exceptional program called Grow Detroit's Young Talent, which provides summer internship experiences.
If you're a GDYT youth, please raise your hand.
This is my favorite week of the year. Congratulations to all of them.
So it started with one intern, quickly grew to 2, to 4, to 8, to then 20. It is really amazing to watch how what started as how can we shape a summer experience for one student very quickly became a team of folks. The city of Detroit with Grow Detroit's Young Talent, Detroit Public Schools, Detroit School of Arts in particular, the Detroit Public School Foundation.
What did he talk about?
We have interns who are working at the Boys and Girls Club in order to help provide programming for technology for the youngsters that are attending there. While this is all going on, we have 11 Detroit School of Arts DSA students who are working on their craft.
When I get older, I would like to do something possibly in film.
In our day and age, media is where it's at.
These kids are bright, brilliant, they do great video work, they're so innovative, they're so creative, and they have so much passion, so much drive that it just inspires me just seeing them do what they do.
I am a father of 3 beautiful little girls, 5, 7, and 9-year-olds. And I'm deeply saddened by friends, colleagues, people sometimes that ask me, what are your future plans for your company? You have girls. And I'm completely in shock by that question. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Girls cannot do technology? They cannot run a manufacturing facility? Why? Where did that perception come from? What can we do to fix that? Being in the technology field, being in manufacturing field should be one of the options.
I'm proud to start to build a life for myself. I'm Melanie Rayford, a student at Wayne State University. I'm studying computer science to be a software engineer, so I'm in the College of Engineering. I'm working with Microsoft this summer, working with the Boys and Girls Club, and it's basically being a mentor to a lot of kids from Detroit, basically helping them with different workshops as far as in coding. And it's basically it's a STEM camp. I really think it's cool, not only they're giving me this opportunity, but the fact that they are allowing me to network and meet a lot of people, and being in this field, and especially being a woman, and an African woman at that, is really great to reach out and know a lot of people who are also doing what I'm doing. I've always grown up around technology, so if I put my mind to wanting to learn how to code, I will do it. I was in 10th grade when I started at the boxing gym. I was in the back like whole senior year because the tutors in the computer lab was like my main support. It gave me a lot of opportunities like the Microsoft internship and also helped me build my resume. Thanks to the applications that I filled out, I was able to receive 2 scholarships. One of the scholarships was for $20,000 from the Coleman and Young Foundation, and my second scholarship was $10,000 from the Shamrock 555 program.
Thank you so much for everything. This is really big because, like, you know, college is very expensive. Very expensive. And I just thought I wasn't gonna be able to go because of all the expenses.
What inspired me to do this is that I do come from a background of technicians as far as my grandmother and my great-granddad.
She lived with her grandma and her mom. Her mom graduated with a degree in information technology, so that was an influencing factor. Her grandma graduated with a degree from Wayne in industrial engineering. She started out chasing technology and ended up doing industrial engineering until she died. When I went to school in the early 60s, they didn't have any computer science. And then somewhere about 70, the first mainframe came along, and that was exciting. So, and banks were in the leading edge of technology, and so my learning experiences, I went along with that curve, with that flood. At Comerica Bank, I was the head of architecture and technology planning. I did that until I retired, basically, and then worked for the city of Detroit with the mayor, and was the chief information officer for the city of Detroit.
I spent a lot of my years with my grandma. She was always a woman who did for herself. If the computer will break, she'll fix it herself. So just being around somebody like that really inspired me to do what I'm doing now. I always had this idea to start like a nonprofit organization for women who suffers from being alcoholic, because that's who my grandma was. So, and she was in the tech field and she was so smart. She was so smart.
There's a whole bunch of family stuff in there. And so when I look at Melanie, I want her to be more than I ever was. She's off to a wonderful start.
How are you?
Good.
Melanie represents for the future all the possibilities. Once she decided she was going to do this, she's going to do this. She has clarity, she has the confidence. And then what I also love about this young lady is that she's already talking about how to pay it forward. Like, you're just starting your career, not even your career, your journey in education and still trying to learn. But she is so cognizant of the people who helped her to get here that she's already talking about what she can do to pull other people up. She's all around, she rocks. My name is Marlon Williams. I'm the Chief Program Officer for TechTown Detroit, Assistant Vice President of Economic Development for Wayne State University, and I am probably most proud to be the founder of an organization called Sisters Code. We empower women ages 25 to 85 to just simply explore the world of technology.
If you look up at the address bar, you'll see that the name of the page is whatever you put in your code. Okay?
I learned to code. It was called programming back then. I'm a mainframe programmer at the age of 25. I will tell you that that decision changed the trajectory of my life. Believing in myself enough to think that I could do this crazy thing just changed everything for me. There are barriers for women, so I always say that there's two. They're external and internal. The external piece could be the hiring practices of some. It could be some unconscious bias, some very conscious bias, some stereotypes about cultural fit.
You're not replacing anything. You're adding the name of your page in between.
Statistics have shown that a lot of women don't go into the STEM fields. So the number of women who are getting degrees in computer science or engineering are not the same from a gender perspective. The internal barriers is just a lack of belief. And I tell people, some women, you just gotta get out of your own way and know that you can do it. I do know for sure, when you have people who can tell you about the awesomeness of this career, it is also very important to have people who look like you, who come from the same place, people from your neighborhood, gender-wise, just all the diversity spectrum. It is really important. And because of the diversity of thought, you want different thoughts at your table to make everything better. Everything from your businesses, be it a restaurant, be it a technology company, be it a retail store, whatever it is, you want that diversity of thought.
The second half is 10 minutes, just like the first half. As of right now, the black team is in the lead. That's my team, 6. We got 6. And the white team over here's got 5. Let's go! Let's go!
We're at Boys and Girls Club of Southeastern Michigan, and what you will see going on is one of our summer sessions taking place. Technology is very important to start engaging our youth at a very young age. It's our goal and job to make sure that we're maximizing their usage and giving them skills that they can actually use into career fields once they leave beyond our doors.
When you tilt it, that's what the accelerometer is. So when you move it, it changes. Everything is on a level playing field, right? That's how compasses work, right?
Our mission is to literally provide youth with world-class experience so they can be change agents for themselves, their lives, and their communities. And hopefully once they get those skills and go out, they'll come back and give that whatever we've given them and share with the rest of the youth that are coming through our doors.
The Sean Anderson Foundation did sponsor for the new recording studio to be here, available for use to all the boys and girls of the Boys and Girls Club, and anybody who has a dream, and anybody who wants to record music. So let's make some noise for that.
These concepts are truly innovative and will help bring the Boys and Girls Club into modern times.
Being born and raised in the city of Detroit, I've been through Detroit public school system, and my mom was a teacher in Detroit public school system. So, I've been through different schools and different locations, and I see the lack of technology resources in a lot of our schools. I don't live in the city anymore. I live in the suburbs, and my kids now, their schools have hundreds of computers in it, every other classroom, or computer labs. That's where the barrier lies. I call it the technological gap. Code 313 is a nonprofit that's partnered with Microsoft, Detroit Pistons, Boys and Girls Club Southeastern Michigan, to provide access to technology and other STEM-related fields to youth between the ages of 7 to 17.
What is loops?
The loop makes the stuff repeat.
Make stuff repeat?
Yeah, so like you could repeat it for
Just
like
repeat?
10 times.
This is our Code Hoop Dreams classroom. We're utilizing the BrainPad made by GHI Electronics. And with that, we're allowing the kids to really explore the wonderful world of coding. Getting the youth involved with it now at an early age gives them that excitement and that passion early to be able to expand on that as they grow older and be ready for all these new technical advances that are coming.
Now, how do we make it so when we press a button, our score goes up?
JaVale's doing everything, for us this summer. We brought him on board to teach our coding class. We had other instructors and teachers, but I said, no, you know what? I want somebody that's closer to the age of our youth and participants for the summer. I want them to see that they can achieve that higher level quickly, like he did. They just have to put the passion behind it, put the work in, and they can be another JaVale.
Go.
Earlier I saw 3D printing, I seen big old LED lights, and I think it's really cool. Right now we're showing off our BrainPad, and we show people how to make video games and how we program robots. We make the code, and then we upload the code to the actual BrainPad, and then the game.
The BrainPad is this little circuit that gets you really excited about technology. You are touching the electronics, you're touching the circuits, you're getting really close to what's happening. You're seeing the brain on the circuit, so you get an understanding of how technology actually happens.
You could create your own ideas, you could develop on it, make robots. People ask me how we made these games and how does it work, and I'm helping a lot of people understand things and develop an interest in certain things.
You just started the game, it's gonna launch, wait for it, go! I was born in Syria, so English is not my first language. And back then, I'm not that old, but back then there was no internet, and it was very difficult to learn about technology. It was very difficult to find the necessary knowledge that is more accessible today. I was never really interested in gaming on computers. Of course, games back then were not that exciting anyway, but I was more interested in making the games, in programming the computer, in taking charge of the machine, making it do something. That, to me, that was fascinating. There's something inside me that always pushed me into thinking of what can I do personally to give back. So spending the summer with JaVale, Melanie, and the other students really show that there are great potential. The idea here is not just JaVale. How many JaVales are out there? How many other students out there? Hadn't we exposed them to technology? Hadn't we exposed them to the possibilities? Hadn't we showed them what is possible for them? They would be lost otherwise. So exposing them to possibilities, showing them the options, would really open their eyes on things that they have not seen before.
The power of technology to really have a serious impact on everyone's lives is what demands or necessitates that we do figure out how to empower as many people as possible because of the amount of good that it can cause. Going into the summer with JaVale, Melanie, and the interns, I thought we were going in to teach them. Turns out that they taught us. I thought we were coming into it in order to create opportunities for them. We didn't even need to do that. All we needed to do was to expose them to the learnings, and they created their own opportunities. At the end of the summer, when the students reflected upon their experience, to say that their stories were moving and funny and witty and touching and aspirational and energizing all in one, really, I think, captured the spirit. And Looking back on the summer, that was really gratifying.
Some of the kids, 10 years from now, they'll look back and say, you know what? This was a spark for me. This was a life-changing moment for me that set me on a path for success.
I'm limitless because I am unstoppable. Anything I put my mind to, it will get done. When people look back at this years from now, even myself, I'm hoping that they will look back at it as someone, as me being an inspiration to them.
I do believe Detroit is limitless. Detroit is definitely limitless. Like, we're growing. Like, we're just going up from here.
At this internship, I got a lot of teaching skills because I was teaching a class of 6 to 14-year-olds, and I basically taught them throughout the whole summer.
We press the input, the brain process what we want it to do, and it does the output, right? Can like one person tell me what each category does?
I would say my goals are the same, but I'm a little bit more interested in teaching.
He just lights up when he talks about teaching. He really enjoys that and really enjoys teaching code in particular. I used to be a teacher. I taught for 15 years. So anytime I hear that someone wants to go into that field, it just gets me super excited.
This really is just the tip of the iceberg. Within each of the 100,000 plus young Detroiters, there's a story in each and every one of them. And it really is incumbent upon us to provide them exposure to opportunities, not only in and around technology, but in and around the jobs of today and tomorrow.
Detroit is limitless.
I feel like this is a place where opportunities and family and success just all comes together.
Detroit has never given up, even in some really pretty bleak down times. We always seem to find that spark that keeps us going. We always have people who are willing to step up as leaders and to keep us moving forward. The limitlessness of Detroit is based on our spirit.
My name is John Smith. I'm 15 years old, going into my junior year at DSA, radio TV major. Really love what I do.
What I want to go into is to broadcast journalism.
I was really thinking about being a game designer.
I had 2 colleges I'm interested in, which are Columbia University and Yale University.
Whatever you do, whatever you put your mind to, it can be legendary and you can do big things. Whether you come from poverty or whether you come from a foster home or you don't go to the best of schools, you can still do anything that you set your mind to.
I use technology on an everyday basis, whether it comes to social media or researching for projects or school.
What role do you think technology will play in your future dream job?
Technology will play like an important role in my future dream job because I might want to become a doctor like my mom, and like technology could be like a huge part in that.
I never knew how to code. People always tried to teach me, but it really wasn't clicking as much. But now I get it.
I feel that my future is already, good, but it's in my hands to make it come to life.
Detroit is limitless because we're amazing. Our city is amazing. I've lived in Detroit all my life, and you should always start from where you live and where you love.
Oh, never mind. Well, come on. I was just going to say another round of applause for Robin. She's right there. It's just really great to see the way that, again, youth are engaging. And thankfully, we're going to have a few of those youth that we had featured in that video. They're actually going to be participating in a variety of our events throughout the week. namely on Wednesday. So again, for folks who have seen that full itinerary, connect33.org, obviously it has a lot of that information, but the same people that you're seeing here are there. I also want to shout out a few folks who we saw their names throughout, and it's interesting to see the ways that they've leaned in. I know some of you were pretty close to Marlon, who is now over at StockX, but as we kind of looked at some of those people, it made me laugh a little bit, because if you think about it, they were in those roles in 2018 and 2019, they're still in Detroit. Now, they might not necessarily be in their respective companies, but they're still in Detroit and they're committed to Detroit. And so I think that what you're seeing throughout this ecosystem is a commitment, and that's going to come over and over and over again. And as we look at kind of the next panel on transitioning to healthcare, a lot of this is the same point that's going to keep coming up about folks' commitment to the city in a long-standing capacity. And so right now, I would like to transition into really looking into the healthcare component of this. And we have a few speakers. You all can make your way to the stage now. Our speakers include Courtney Stevens, who is the Director of Telehealth for Henry Ford Health Systems. In addition, Dr. Paul Thomas from Plum Health. And then lastly, Shannon Wilson, who is the Vice President of State Markets for Priority Health. Thank you, panelists. Thank you. You can choose whatever seat you'd like. Okay, you can choose that one. Oh, you got up here quick. How are you? Good. Thanks for having me over. Oh, yeah, sure. I got you. This is yours.
Oh, thanks.
So, all right. Again, thank you, panelists, for joining us today. The very first question, underhand question, introduce yourself and your organization, and who are you, what do you do? And in any particular order, because there's only 3 of you all, I shouldn't mess that up.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. So my name is Courtney Stevens. As he mentioned, I'm the Director of Virtual Care at Henry Ford Health System. I actually loved watching that video because I have an industrial engineering degree. So listening to the family with the grandmother who went through Wayne State and got an industrial engineering degree was very heartwarming to myself. It was interesting going from an industrial engineering degree to healthcare, because a lot of people said, what are you gonna do in healthcare? That doesn't make sense. You're gonna go into automotive, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought she was talking to me. Where we really found value was the interest in really trying to improve processes and trying to improve the healthcare that individuals were receiving. And what virtual care and telehealth has been able to do is bring that care right into the patient's home. They no longer do they need to be bound by the geographic or the brick and mortar associated with showing up at a clinic or a hospital, but we really have the ability to take that care right to their couch, their kitchen, their work, or whatever is convenient to them. So I've really been privileged to be able to help Henry Ford usher into that era of technology in the use of healthcare.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shannon Wilson. I have the pleasure of serving as the Vice President of State Markets East at Priority Health. In addition to that, I also serve as the Executive Director of the Total Healthcare Foundation, a foundation that was founded when Priority Health acquired Total Healthcare in 2019. We committed over $20 million to the city of Detroit, Southeast Michigan, and I get the pleasure of giving those dollars away. Through my role as Vice President of State Markets East, I also oversee our Medicaid population here in Detroit. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Paul Thomas. I'm a family physician with Plum Health DPC in Detroit. We have an office in Corktown. We believe that healthcare should be affordable and accessible for everyone. And that's radical because it isn't traditionally accessible for folks, especially in Detroit. You may know that there's one primary care physician in the city of Detroit for every 6,000 residents. And if you go north of 8 Mile into Oakland County, there's one primary care physician for every 600 residents. So it's a 10x disparity in healthcare access and resources going from Detroit to Oakland County in terms of primary care. So I started a practice where our patients pay a membership for healthcare. They pay $10 a month for children, starting at $49 a month for adults, and they can call, text, email, FaceTime, Skype, anything they want with us anytime they need to. And that's all included in that monthly membership. And then we dramatically lower the cost of meds, labs, and imaging by about 50 to 90% on those services.
Yeah, we all said wow there. Well, one, again, thank you all for being here. And I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but this doesn't exclude you from answering, so please weigh in here. But what are some of the challenges that the general population may not be aware of as far as facilitating digital equity and healthcare access? So pretty much, how, from a general standpoint, how does our general population, how are we unaware of the way that the digital divide impacts healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, you can start with this really easily and just by talking about internet access. So a lot of our patients who live in Detroit may have a cell phone, but that doesn't necessarily they have internet to hop onto like a telehealth app. So that's why it's so important that they can call their physician directly. And that's what we offer at our clinic. And one of the challenges that patients have who aren't familiar with the healthcare system is how to get a hold of a physician when they actually need to talk to somebody. And that can be really difficult as you call a physician's office, you're on hold for an hour, they leave a note for the nurse, and then the doctor sends you an email back. Perhaps you don't have reliable internet access to get that email. So that becomes a really big barrier. And then also the way we concentrate primary care resources, a lot of folks feel comfortable walking to the doctor's office, and if the doctor's not in the neighborhood, that can be a big barrier. And then the last thing I'll say is tying health care in this country to employment is a detriment because health insurance, as we know, is tied to our employers, and then we insure primary care through health insurance, which I think is backwards. Primary care is really low cost and easy to access if you pay cash for primary care services, and so it leaves a lot of people who aren't reliably employed or maybe are doing gig economy work or in a job where they're not afforded benefits like a hairdresser, bartender, service worker, truck driver. It excludes those folks from traditional health insurance resources.
And I would say many of the population that he spoke to that are excluded from traditional health resources end up coming to us on a Medicaid plan, right? And so we're looking at how we can provide those services. And when we went through, or anytime you go through a digital divide, but particularly during COVID when everything was shut down, even signing up for something like Medicaid became a problem. And so if traditionally you would go into your Health and Human Services office and get signed up or something like that, but HHS is closed, then the only way to do it was online. And so if you don't have resources, that becomes a huge problem. And so it's things like that. When we talk about underemployment, yes, being employed is a major factor, but as you said, it also leads to insurance. When we think about things like being able to shop for groceries and safely shopping for groceries, a lot of folks were able to switch to using an online provider to deliver groceries. But if you cannot use that online provider, then are you suscepting yourself to additional risk? We're talking about everything from employment to education, and I think we've seen all day about the major differences in education for those who have access to internet, to stable internet, if you will, and those who don't. And we know that the more educated a person is, the more wealth they're able to acquire, the healthier they are in the long run. And so all in all, it may seem like a very small divide right now, but what it does is it sets the stage for an even larger divide further down the line. And we've been very clear on the outcomes of that in healthcare, and I think that beginning to address these issues, particularly through the way that Connect 313 is doing it, is setting a fantastic foundation.
And I 100% agree with both of my colleagues, and I won't reiterate anything that they've said, but two things I want to add to that is, we talked about digital divide and that digital desert or gap that even exists in the city of Detroit. And I think another level of that is digital literacy. So even though when they do get access, or if they do get access, are they comfortable with using that technology, especially when it comes to healthcare? I mean, people are very cautious to try something different and new when it's their health that they're dealing with or working with. So really getting people educated and comfortable with the use of technology, I think, is one barrier. Another thing is just telehealth literacy. When is it appropriate to use some of these tools versus physically having to come into a clinic? Here, I think, becomes an important role of the provider and the care team, and I'm really glad to hear what Plum Health has done, because they've really opened the door to say, contact us any way that makes sense for you. It's your health, it's your wellness, we want to make sure we're here for you. And that's the type of dialogue that needs to be had with the patient, so that they're not weary about using the technology to help facilitate their care, their access, and beyond.
Wonderful. So the follow-up question to that then, as you are profoundly aware, we've talked about it all day around the multiple digital divides. This current one, obviously, that we've been really focusing on has a lot to do with internet access, and thank you for pointing out stable internet. If we were to successfully bridge the digital divide, meaning that every single Detroiter, or anyone in the country, fine, but Detroit, had quality internet access, and we weren't worried about it shutting off when, hey, you know, my car broke down, so therefore I'm going to spend my money doing that. No, people had quality day in and day out internet access. They fully adopted it. They had computers that they knew how to use. They had tech support that was affordable, that they could call at a moment's notice. What does that mean for healthcare? If we did all of that, so I'm pretty much saying we do our side of it, and then on your side, what does that look like for Detroit?
You guys mind if I start with this one? So one of the big things that we had to overcome at Henry Ford was the physician gap. And part of that was getting the physician access, but also physicians comfortable with using the technology as well. So even if the city of Detroit and all of these digital gaps and education and everything is filled on the patient side, I think we still have to make sure that the providers are available, the providers are connected, and it's the right provider for the patient too. What this is really doing also is opening up the door of preference for a patient as well. They don't have to go to the provider that's around the corner from them anymore. They can pick one that maybe is an ethnicity that they're comfortable with, or a gender that they're comfortable with, or has a care philosophy that really meets what that patient needs, because geography and location has been broken down by a barrier. So I still think, and remember, our physicians were not trained this way, many of them at least. They weren't trained to do that. They were trained to do hands-on, they were trained to do in the clinic. So it also is a change management and an evolution on the healthcare delivery side to make sure that they are comfortable, confident, and on board with delivering this care as well. And that's been a journey for us at Henry Ford.
I think one of the other things we have to focus on is really making sure that people are comfortable with the technology. And so while we're training on the physician side, also making sure that we're working with our, we call them members, you call them patients, but working with our members, our patients, our community to ensure their level of comfort in doing a virtual visit, if you will. For some, going through COVID-19 was the first time they had ever done that. And it was a very different shift, and some really loved it, and I think we'll continue on with it from here on out, and others, it may not be their cup of tea. And I think it's fine either way, but I think as a community, as the healthcare community, we have to do our part in ensuring a level of comfort on behalf of those members and patients that we work with. The other thing I would say is this may not be a if you build it, they will come type of thing. Right, so this is going to be, we're in it for the long haul. We do see value in giving that choice and allowing members and patients to have the flexibility to meet with their provider team in the way that suits them best. But this is something that we will have to stay diligent with for the long haul. And the only other thing I would add is that one of the values that we've seen in coming out of this work is the ability to have a patient navigator with you during the call. It gives a lot more flexibility to have someone right there with you in the room that can help you understand, particularly for our older adult populations and our lower literacy populations.
honoring that preference, right?
Yeah, I think if you fix all of the, let's say, patient side or individual side in the community, it still doesn't address all the numerous gaps. I think we touched on cultural competency is super important, but you still need to have somebody there in the neighborhood who can evaluate people in person. The digital health, telemedicine is helpful for certain things, like let's say pink eye or strep throat or simple things, but they're not going to address the complex management where you need to have a physical examination with a physician. And that's never going to go away. You're always going to need to have a visit with a physician to help you manage. And even something as simple as drawing blood. You know, that's why we draw blood in our office, because it becomes a one-stop shop for people to be seen by a physician, have their blood work done, and then get their medication so that they can do all that in one visit and not have to go to multiple locations. I will say another thing is that access to the internet still doesn't address the many health barriers that people in our community face, which include transportation. About a third of Detroiters lack access to reliable transportation. So you could have the physician visit by telemedicine, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to go out and get the meds unless there's a wraparound to mail the meds to the patient. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the right lab work done, because they're still going to have to go to a physical facility to get that done, unless you have a cost-efficient way of going out to the patient's home and drawing their blood. I don't think so. And then just access to healthy foods and parks and safe ways to get places. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but you know, there's a major age longevity gap between New York City residents and Detroit residents in the lower income bracket, because in New York City, there's reliable transportation to get to parks, to get to grocery stores, to be able to walk to a grocery store or to a public library where you can access internet. In Detroit, there's just so many barriers that we have to tackle still.
Well, that's I'm thankful for you all's insight collectively, because I think that this is, you're hitting on a point that we made at the very beginning of this, at the beginning of the day, I should say, that even if we get caught up in the moment, there are divides behind the divides behind the divides. And we don't necessarily need to be seduced by an easy win, because then we're gonna get short-sighted. And ultimately, the things that we actually could impact, had we just been a bit more focused, we could be addressing those. So again, thank you for that, as well as adding trust into the mix. That is something where, again, as we look at our original three-legged stool around digital inclusion, it keeps expanding, rightfully so. The more that we're learning from our residents and from our organizations that are pledging to serve our residents, it's enabling us to see a bigger picture. One of the things with this bigger picture that I would like to ask you all, are there specific examples where you see communities, and it doesn't have to just be in Detroit, it can be anywhere, where you've seen communities show up in a way where they've made telehealth or digital health more accessible for their residents? And if so, what did they do? And I think that if you're reading in between the lines there, what we're kind of asking is, how can we in Detroit begin finding ways, identifying ways to legitimately be supportive in an operationalized functional capacity, where we can show up and say, hey, this is Connector, for example, our dedicated way of supporting residents. You know, we can point to something that we're doing with workforce, point to something that we're doing with banking or whatever. We can go down that line, but from a healthcare and well-being standpoint, are there examples that you've seen where we could potentially try replicating that at scale within the city of Detroit?
I had to write them down because they were flowing through my head as you were speaking. So let me share two things that Henry Ford is doing, and then I have a couple ideas from the city and 313 perspective. So at Henry Ford, we are engaging community paramedics that can actually help go to the patient's home. So some of the things that were mentioned was like blood draws and things like that, that if you don't have reliable transportation, you might be able to do a virtual visit, but you can't execute through there. So we've worked with some community paramedics to have that be a conduit or a connection that can go into the patient's home and help with some of those physical pieces. We've also worked with community health workers who are already engaged with some of these patient populations and working on social determinants of health, having consistent food, having consistent pieces to their livelihood, and how can we help use that resource to either introduce, educate, or help patients with some of those virtual connections. So those are two things that Henry Ford's been working on. A couple ideas when we think of the broader city picture. I've heard of many cities where they actually set up in libraries or coffee shops, almost like internet cafes, where people can come and they can have access to a private space to be able to use the technology and the computer to be able to connect with a healthcare professional. So public areas, public spaces for them to have access, but then creating that private space within there where they feel comfortable and confident executing their care. And also the opportunity for educational classes. I just had a great meeting with an organization that is older adults teaching older adults. And they have a menu of classes that they offer. But some of the classes they offer is technology, computer, smartphone, how to use these items, but then also how to use your patient portal or a virtual visit with your providers. So, and one of the speakers on the video earlier talked about wanting to have that 16-year-old teaching the kids to code because it was somebody closer to their age. I think that also speaks to sometimes our older population too, to have a peer teaching them and showing them and using language that they may understand, I think is a good way to connect, and that may be an opportunity and some resources that can be tapped into.
Yeah, I think this is the billion-dollar question, right? Because there is no easy solution, and a lot of our healthcare data and information is siloed into private companies. For example, large hospital X has a really difficult time sharing your health information with hospital system Y, and it's oftentimes intentional to keep you in-house and not be able to allow you to see another doctor outside of that system and maintain the downstream revenue for, let's say, hospital system X. And so it's really hard in this environment, the way we've set up health care delivery in the United States, especially how we've set it up around specifically your health insurance, to facilitate easy access to a physician, because oftentimes your information is siloed into like an Epic EMR system versus like a New Innovations EMR system. And so these two systems don't really talk to each other, and if they do, it's via fax, which, like, what are we doing? Why are we faxing health information in 2021? Can somebody explain this to me? I know I'm a panelist here, but I don't have the answer on that. Like, can we get away from faxes and give people their health information that they can easily share with the doctor of their choice? They should easily be able to see a cardiologist at U of M, primary care physician at Henry Ford, endoscopist or a gastroenterologist at DMC or whatever, but that's just not the case right now because of the siloed and fragmented nature of our health insurance delivery system, and it gives patients worse health outcomes because it makes it more and more difficult for them to access care. And so I'm pretty bleak on this one. I'm sorry to be a downer today, but I don't have an answer for you.
I just add in that we too are doing several things like the community health workers. We're also sending out visiting nurses into neighborhoods to make sure that we're providing services that members' patients can't get into the office to get. In addition to that, we do have some rather cool lab test kits that we can send home and allow patients to take themselves and send back, which eliminates the need for some of the testing that is necessary for more routine things like diabetes, hypertension. But we are trying to give more freedom and power to the member of the patient to be able to take care of their own healthcare and then to provide the resources necessary to do so. One of the other things that we've really invested in at Priority Health is cell phones and really promoting the use of cell phones, particularly with our Medicaid population. The federal government has a program, and I always tell people, I think we may not know about this because it's a really nice, it's like an LG phone, it's a decent phone, but you get unlimited minutes and unlimited data And can you, yeah, exactly, my thoughts exactly. Unlimited minutes, unlimited data for the time being. And so really promoting programs like that so that everyone does at least have a point of access. And all of our virtual visits can be accessed from a cell phone, particularly a smartphone. And this happens to be a smartphone that they would receive free of charge. And so we think that just promoting services like that also provides access.
And I guess the follow-up to that one could be, how could we be most effective in promoting that? Are there ways that you've seen it? Obviously, I know that we're running a really robust internet campaign, so I can mention that, but that's self-serving, so I won't. But have there been efforts that you've seen where local communities have been able to be galvanized to facilitate that trust so then people are taking care of those offerings?
You know, particularly my population is the Medicaid population, but when thinking about the Medicaid population, word of mouth is really the best way to get that done. And so having influencers or people on the ground in community who can testify or provide testament to the product and what the value that it brings is really the best way to go about that.
And you mentioned trust earlier. I think a lot of the important piece is finding community organizations that the patient trusts, right? And this could be their church. This could be their library. This could be their parks and recreation. So I think part of it is also partnering with those various groups in the community that the patient already has connection and trust in, and making sure that we are equipping them with the information and we're equipping them with the support they need to bring it to the patient. Because even, you talk about the phone program, and it's funny because I often forget about it because I think a lot of times people are afraid they're not gonna qualify, or the paperwork's gonna be too hard. So to have a navigator or have somebody there that can help ease the stress of the process or simplify it, I think in partnership of that trusted partner, I think is a good path.
And just so everybody's on the same page, if you qualify for Medicaid, you should qualify for the program.
One of the things that, and as I'm listening to you all, I keep getting reminded of how similar a lot of these issues are across the board. So it's like, again, insert whatever problem we're trying to solve, X, and then you're gonna have the same vertical. And what I mean by that is trust is still this really big barrier, stable funding, huge barrier, as well as having siloed systems, really big barrier. And then in addition to that, not having the level of data that's needed to then empower our interventions effectively. We could literally be talking about anything right now. It just so happens we were talking about the digital divide. But to transition into looking at the future, and I guess the future is really going to be a combination of some of the stuff that's present, but the future is a little bit unequally distributed, especially in the context of the digital divide. And so when looking at the future, what role do you all seeing some of the smart home devices play as it relates to healthcare? Because what we're looking at now, our digital divide that we're framing today, looks a lot like, again, internet access, computers, digital literacy. That's almost like, that's the old school digital divide. But as we begin double clicking on a variety of these sectors, you have these smart home devices. You have Alexa. I remember when I was doing similar work in Cleveland, and we were working to facilitate Alexa devices in homes for older adults who had arthritis, and using voice technology to be able to do simple functions that wouldn't require someone to have to write or type anything. And so as you are looking at the future as it relates to some of these smart devices and the future of healthcare delivery, what, I guess, commentary can you provide there?
I don't think that having an in-home device is going to be transformational for an individual. I think it's going to be a tool to help facilitate maybe an appointment. You could say to your Alexa, please call my physician to schedule an appointment. Or you could set up your Alexa to remind you every day or twice a day to take your medications or do the stretches and strengthening exercises that will help with your arthritis. But as a physician, I'm not going to be, I don't think I'm going to be calling my patient through the Alexa or leveraging the Alexa. I think I'm going to be calling my patient on their cell phone and speaking with them that way, or FaceTiming them if that's comfortable for them to deliver that care interaction.
I think there aren't many silver linings that have come with COVID-19, right? But if there was one, I think it did propel us into greater acceptance of digital devices, having virtual visits, things like that. It was lagging in a lot of populations, and I think it's become a lot more widely accepted now as a result of COVID-19 and our pivot, if you will. That being said, I do think that we will create a divide in the haves and the have-nots if we don't begin to embrace some of these smart devices. And so everything from sleep devices that monitor your sleep and are able to communicate right back to your doctor, or heart monitors that are able to monitor things from afar that allow us to have more information and data to better treat with. I do not in any way, shape, or form think it replaces the physician or the in-person physician visit, but I do think that it gives us data that we didn't have access to on the in-between. Right? And that information can help us really build out a care plan or a care management plan that will benefit the individual overall. And I think for those of us or those populations that don't embrace or don't move down that road, it definitely will begin to create a divide in those who have and those who do not.
That's funny. I gotta tell a little anecdotal story, because you mentioned during COVID we all got more comfortable with technology. So we embraced DoorDash and Grubhub in my household, a lot of food deliveries in my household. And it's funny, my son said to me the other day, he's 7, we said, oh, how about we have pizza delivered? And he looks at me, he goes, they deliver pizza? Why don't we get like Olga's or Outback or something? And I just thought it very funny, because the rest of us, pizza was the only food you could have delivered for the longest time. Does anybody remember that? So I just thought it was like the different generational gaps that we're gonna have, I think is gonna be very interesting. But one of the things that you mentioned that I latched onto was having the devices in the home, or having devices that collect vital information. And by vital information, I mean actual vitals from our patient, gives us a more longitudinal view of the patient versus the episodic that we may have gotten previously. So it is a slightly different view that might be helpful in some healthcare care and wellness journeys. The other thing I think that's going to be important, though, is it needs to be device agnostic and be able to bring your own device. So if you have an Apple Watch, if you have a Fitbit, if you have a whatever, it's all data that's going to be available to be used, not you have to have a specific device. You have to have a specific, because I think that's going to create another divide right there, or siloed data, like we were just talking about. The other thing is that I think technology will bring us to, and we're starting to encroach on this at Henry Ford, is devices that actually help you have a device-enabled exam from home. So it pairs with your smartphone, but it can do heart sounds, it can do lung sounds. You can put an otoscope attachment in, and the patient can actually stick it in their own ear, and the provider can see their eardrum and see if it's inflamed and an earache and things like that. Not every patient's going to have the device per se, but I think it does give us an opportunity to go beyond just the audio video and really give that provider some additional insights into what's going on with that patient with the use of that technology.
Wonderful. So as I'm looking at, again, some of the future as it relates to our work around Connect 3 and 3. And again, as we're trying to figure out, as we move forward, ways that we can be, I wouldn't say valuable or useful, ways that we can show up in a functional capacity for diverse populations. You know, some of the work we were able to do over the past year or so, looking at, for example, distance learning for youth. Okay, that makes sense. We can show up there on the education front. If you were, and I guess this is a pseudo megaphone that you had, for this larger body, so to speak, to be more supportive around facilitating digital equity at the intersection of health equity, how can we be most valuable to you all in this ecosystem?
That's a really hard question.
It's the last question, so I mean, I was trying to like.
As we solve the world. Now we're doing fast pitch. You know, no more labs for us. Well, a couple things I'll mention, and probably once you guys start talking, I'll probably think of more. But I think the advocacy, and by advocacy, I mean not only with the member, the patient, with the physician, but also with the government, around telehealth and virtual care, because we're also at a very pivotal stage right now that we're still in a public health emergency, and there's a lot of telehealth waivers and flexibilities that are in place, but they're all hinged on that public health emergency. And some of them actually require congressional action to make permanent. And so we are advocating at every, anybody who will listen, so you talk about megaphones, to make sure that they understand the value that this is bringing to patients and members. And to the point made earlier, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but for those that this has really created a solid connectivity into their healthcare needs, we can't take this away. We can't go back to 1990 where pizzas were the only thing delivered at your doorstep, right? We need to make sure that we are continuing to advocate for this on top of the barriers you spoke of digital divide and things like that.
And I would just echo that advocacy, from a payer perspective, we're able to pay for it because it's in the emergency order. And so when that goes away, it becomes a very different conversation on the payer side. And so just to make sure that we're continuing to advocate, I think is critically important.
Yeah, I have a different perspective, a completely different perspective. I think we need to completely separate health insurance from the delivery of health care and create a system where we insure for catastrophic events like car accidents, strokes, cancer care, hospitalizations, but we should strive towards a system where everyone could walk to their local doctor's office or call their local physician and have an affordable, accessible visit where they can actually talk to a doctor, not necessarily nurse, guide or something like that, but a physician who can help them with a broad range of concerns and be able to speak to someone in their neighborhood who has a cultural competency. And I think as long as we couple healthcare delivery with health insurance, we're going to keep running into these same problems because that's the way it's been. And it's a difficult cycle to break. But until we make a change towards a different style of delivery, we're going to keep having these same digital divides, health divides, primary care delivery divides that are going to keep on echoing into the future.
One of the things I've always admired Connect 313 on is their connectivity into businesses and community partners and things like that. And I still think there's a great opportunity to make sure that we are finding that circle of trust with our patients and utilizing those partners to really propel a message, propel information, or propel support forward to them. So as we look at, what can Connect 313 do to kind of help, it's utilize those relationships and those partnerships and partner with organizations or businesses like the three that we have sitting up here to figure out what information gap or what information might be useful for those members or those patients or those community members to really utilize these tools to move their healthcare journey forward.
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you, and also for those who are unaware, I chair the FCC's telehealth committee, and so the next year's telehealth report, I'm gonna need help because I'm not necessarily a telehealth expert per se, but I think that what I'm hearing from you all, which is reassuring, digital health, telehealth, technology, these are all great things, and it's gonna be afforded to a certain population. And it's going to make a nominal difference, but it's not going to be the thing that is ultimately going to alleviate these longstanding health inequities. But at the same time, what that does for me, that allows us to right-size the discussion, because we don't necessarily need, Batman. Maybe we need more Alfreds. And I'm okay with looking at this from that standpoint as it relates to our work here around Connect 313. We're going to advocate to the level that's needed. And I think that, what we've been doing, I believe the program you're alluding to is a Lifeline program. But what we've been doing through Connect 313 and the Emergency Broadband Benefit has been signing people up for a program that is very similar to Lifeline and that everyone has to be nationally verified. And so, quite frankly, we can keep running the same play over and over again. And as we're doing that, we just need to make sure that, we have a concentrated strategy on the back end where we're able to point to a variety of healthcare providers and even begin illuminating some of the challenges. Because I think that right now, what we're getting caught up in is focusing on, again, the first digital divide, getting people to sign up for internet and doing whatever. And I think that there's a larger role that we could play, which is specifically in supporting some of these other programs that you all are mentioning. So I think that's going to be our commitment moving forward. But I'm going to ask you all, last words, if there's any last words that you all would like to express that you were not able to express on this panel before I wrap this up.
Yep. I was just going to add to your last comment. You mentioned barriers on top of barriers on top of barriers. It's a big ocean to boil, but we can't be afraid of it and we can't back away from it. I think we got to continue to chip away, bring those barriers down, bring the community, bring everybody with us, and then ultimately, hopefully, we'll bring everybody higher afloat. But we can't be discouraged by just one barrier being brought down and it not fixing the world.
I would focus in on courage and collaboration. I think what we're trying to do is huge. But I'm so encouraged by the fact that we are courageous in our attempt to boil the ocean, if you will. And then collaboration, I think it shouldn't go unnoticed that you have Henry Ford, Priority Health, and Plum Health sitting on the stage together talking about how we are working to improve the digital divide. And so I think each of us, we may go at it in our own way, but we are all committed to the outcome of improved health outcomes for our members and patients.
Yeah, I'll leave you with an anecdote or two. So one of our patients had pink eye on Saturday morning. He sent me a text message. This is a guy who qualified for Medicaid, but unfortunately he became employed. And once he started earning like $13, $14 an hour, he was kicked off of Medicaid because the cutoff for Medicaid is $17,000 in a year. And so he sent me a text at 10 a.m. on Saturday. He said, I think I have pink eye. He sent me a photo of his eye. I was able to call him, discuss his symptoms, and then call his pharmacy and call on a medication for him. I texted him this morning. He's feeling a lot better. The issue's resolved. He sent me a follow-up pic. That's a great use of telemedicine. I have another patient, also a Detroiter, who has immobility after surgery and a large pressure ulcer on their back. And this is someone I make a house call for. And I can't replace that visit with telehealth. I need to be able to go see them, to help them change the dressing, to draw the blood there, deliver some medications. And I think the big part of this conversation is right-sizing what telemedicine can do and what it can't. And I firmly believe in that patient-doctor relationship and being able to deliver care at bedside.
Well, one, can I get a round of applause for our panelists here? So we do have a little bit of time if anyone does want to ask any questions, but if not, then we can then move on to our next panel. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, they want a picture. They're going to take a picture. Set the mics down. I'll take your mics.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is LaShawna Manigault, and I am co-chair, vice chair of the Policy, Advocacy, and Ecosystem Committee. Thanks again for hanging in there with us on our first day of Digital Inclusion Week. We're really excited about the phenomenal speakers that we've had up to this point, and the conversation continues. I would like to bring to the front our final forum of the day, E-Waste Policy, the New Frontier, and the speakers are James Jack, Chief Innovation Officer of Human IT, and Matthew Naud from Resource Recycling Services.
All right. So, e-waste. First and foremost, and this is rinse and repeat at this point, name, what you do, and the role of your organization as well. Either one of you can go first.
Matt Naud, born and raised in Detroit, 7 in Livernois, Sherwood Forest. Live in Ann Arbor now. I was the sustainability guy for the city of Ann Arbor for 17 years and work with a group now that's recycle.com. And so they help cities, states, brands recycle things. No incineration, no landfill work. So That's the kind of work I'm doing now, and there's a big new state program I'll talk about.
My name is James Jack. I'm co-founder and chief innovation officer at Human IT. My main work focuses on making sure we're being as innovative as possible, as well as managing some of our largest partnerships. And Human IT is a social enterprise that creates equitable access to opportunities, mainly focusing on bridging the digital divide, providing digital inclusion services to the community.
All right, so first question out the gate. What is electronic waste? What is that? You know, we said e-waste on here, but what is electronic waste? And what is electronic waste role in reducing the digital divide?
So I was thinking about, you know, one of the biggest misnomers, I think, is the term e-waste, because most people, I think, when they hear e-waste, they probably envision this broken monitor in a trash can somewhere. And that's true. That's one part of e-waste. But e-waste also can be a 3-year-old computer that a company just no longer needs, a computer that works and really should end up going to help someone in need. So e-waste is just any type of technology we've discarded as either a person or an organization, but the type of technology within e-waste really varies. And how it really relates to the digital divide is it could absolutely be a key driver in helping bridge the digital divide, because I'll throw one stat out before I pass it back, is we throw away 150,000 computers every single day as a country. So if we know a big piece of the digital divide is the device gap, that's one of the first places we should start, because right now, around 80% of all the e-waste, including those computers, are actually just ending up in landfills and at best being recycled, when actually they could change someone's life.
Well, that's a good stat I didn't know, and to follow on that, 84% of everything we bury in landfills, that's plastics, organics, e-waste, could be recycled. So we have some just broad structural problems in Michigan where we're not recycling enough of this, reusing it, and kind of building that circular economy, which is a whole other equity piece that is part of this. You know, beyond the digital divide, we can take those resources, use it to build new businesses, new companies, and put people back to work, especially in Michigan where we make stuff.
So then the follow-up question, and you could easily answer this in a in a snarky way, so I'm going to take that option off the table by saying, so the question is, what happens if we don't recycle our electronic waste? Because as you all had mentioned, 150,000 computers are going to a landfill a day, and that's just computers. That's not the whole spectrum of electronic waste. So what happens when we don't? And I'm going to take the response off the table of, well, we get what we get today, because largely speaking, a lot of people aren't recycling it. And that's why it's that's why it's ending up in landfills. But I guess the sub-question is, what are we missing when we do that? And to give you a parallel, think about it like this. When we began looking at the digital divide and we talk about how many people aren't connected, 25 to 30% routinely who don't have access to the internet. What do we miss out of that 25 to 30%? You can guess. I mean, you can guess on workforce, on economic development, on banking, on literally whatever sector you want. Just imagine 25 to 30% market share walking every single time. And so what I'm saying is the parallel, what happens on the electronic waste front if we do nothing? What are we missing there?
This one?
Yeah, you know, my bigger number, and again, I come at this from that full spectrum of things we aren't recycling in Michigan. We calculated if we bury about 6.8 million tons that could be recycled. If we could keep 2.7 million out, Michigan would start to approach 50% diversion, which is good, but we're 18% right now, which is not great at all. We calculate if you take that material and you put it back in a circular economy, it's $9 billion of labor income. So that's the lost opportunity. The other thing I'll add is the metals that are in that e-waste, if it's not recycled appropriately, it ends up in third world countries with young kids breaking it apart, and there are toxic heavy metals in that. So that's a whole other issue with that material going in landfills that at some point they're going to leak, and at some point that's a burden that's going to go back on Michigan taxpayers.
Oh,
Yeah, I think just to build on that, Josh, you're discussing the opportunity cost, right? While we may be able to keep items out of landfills and make sure it doesn't harm us environmentally, there is technology that every part of the community needs. There's the computers that obviously students and your average citizen population needs to just conduct their normal life. But there's also computers, audio, video equipment, different pieces of technology that small businesses can use. And a lot of times they'll have barrier to getting enterprise grade technology because of the price tag. Well, a lot of that enterprise grade technology still exists, but it's being discarded and end up in landfills. And so really the technology the entire community needs, from small businesses, medium-sized businesses, all the way up, is within this e-waste stream. And if we continue to just view it as waste, we're gonna, I think, continue to repeat the same mistakes. But if we really view e-waste as a precious resource that has a dollar value associated with it, not only in the labor to turn it around back to the community, but in the actual items themselves, you'll realize that this is just a great opportunity that we're sitting on, which is making sure that e-waste actually gets into the circular economy and can be redistributed back out into the community.
So the follow-up question to that, and the question even behind it's going to seem similar, but not totally. The follow-up question there then goes to the both of you. James, you can answer this one nationally or within the state context. Matt, then the same can be afforded to you. When looking at e-waste and the greater recycling ecosystem, if you had an ask to the state, what would that ask be? One ask. I said, I guess.
Yeah, for
You
me,
don't have to.
I
James,
think
you
what
want-
we're going to see, and we've got a little bit of it here at the state, is extended producer responsibility, that the producers are responsible for making sure materials are recycled. But I think that reuse and, recirculating it and repairability is a whole other piece of that, that we envision repair and reuse centers in cities so that people can bring their electronics, bring their furniture, anything that they can kind of take advantage of, elder smarts in the community to fix it and keep it out of a landfill. But I think we're starting to see Maine and Oregon do extended producer responsibility, and having that be, I think, work better, because it's obviously not working well enough here in e-waste if we're still burying all that. And then extend that across for plastics and other things, that whole circular economy gets strengthened.
Yeah, I think a good first step is possibly the state, or even on a federal level, walking the walk themselves first, right? Ensuring that the e-waste that they get rid of actually goes to support the community and every bit of it is recycled, right? Nothing ends up in landfills. A good example of some legislation that hasn't passed yet but is in line with this is the COVES Act, which is Computers for Veterans and Students, which actually would implore the federal government through the GSA to make sure that when there's excess computers, it can actually go to schools or well-deserving nonprofits and citizens in need. And so I think that can be done at a state and even a city level, which is really one of the first steps, is just making sure the government shows and raise awareness about how we can actually use, again, this resource, which is e-waste, and not just view it as a waste stream that's analogous to other waste that maybe not, they don't have that much value.
Matt, you had mentioned earlier, I believe it was $7 billion? $9 billion. $9 billion.
$9 billion.
$9 billion. $9 billion. That's the missed opportunity here. And when we double click on workforce, let's double click on that, for example. How does this conversation manifest as relates to workforce? I know, James, how you're going to answer that question, because obviously that's the operation that's running in Detroit. But Matt, on your side of the house, if I said electronic waste or just recycling in general plus workforce, what does that mean?
I think what we're starting to see, and Next Cycle Michigan is a new state initiative with 6 different accelerator tracks to build end markets for recycled material. And that's how we got connected to Human IT, that they're a whole part of the ecosystem, that they're pulling material that could be going to a landfill and going somewhere else. And I think what we're seeing as we think about new companies and new jobs, that those are a lot of good entry-level jobs for people. So it kind of starts to fill a space whether it's somebody working at a material recovery facility, because we're going to need huge new facilities all over the state, and a lot of those are robotics. So, I keep thinking about where's Focus Hope fit in this, and worker training, and kind of there's a lot of STEAM elements in this recycling that, Recycle Ann Arbor is building a brand new MRF in Ann Arbor, trying to put in a $900,000 optical sorter because it will pull polypropylene specifically out of this mixed plastics, and that polypropylene is worth a lot. And I think there's going to be models in the e-waste and how we're better able to separate these chemicals and elements that otherwise we're mining. And I think a lot of it's in third world countries and the equity issues along with that. So I think that's a little broader than the workforce, but we just see the opportunity for a lot of new jobs and new companies in Michigan if we do this right, and starting those jobs in Detroit, Flint, Benton Harbor, rural Michigan, where we really need those jobs.
Yeah, I think to build on that, workforce in a very direct form, we need people to help collect these items, refurbish technology. But I think what you're touching on is there can be a whole industry birthed out of solving the problem to how do we responsibly recycle technology and, more importantly, reuse it. That's going to make way for future entrepreneurs to figure out innovative ways to solve the solution. So I think it goes deeper than just managing of the e-waste, but it's really a brand new ecosystem, and that means there's brand new entries for up and coming entrepreneurs to make a real difference here, solving some of the world's biggest problems.
Okay, so to the both of you, your biggest recycling win. James, I feel like you can go first on this one. He's just being modest.
I think it would have to be probably our entry into the city, into Detroit, because I've never seen a city move as one and really get support from the local, local government, local business leaders here, like Rocket, that works with us to make sure they're showcasing how e-waste can actually leverage to support the community. So I think having a place, open up here, our second location in really the city of innovation, the proving grounds for, I think, what the future of digital inclusion is going to be. And that's for human IT, cornerstone around that is actually making sure that we're innovating around e-waste. I would say that's one of our biggest wins, because I know that Detroit is going to showcase what the future of e-waste management looks like, and specifically how you use that to leverage and bridge the digital divide. So I would say that's our biggest win.
For me, I think I'll point to the state. I think the state's been very innovative, and a win for Michigan is there's new money being invested in this recycling space, and not just grants to communities one-offs. These are about, again, how do we create businesses and jobs to use these materials? Let's build those end markets, because that ends up being sustainable, not only on the economics, creates workforce, but we're calculating 7 million metric tons of climate benefit, carbon benefit, and put that in scale. Ann Arbor's carbon footprint, Grand Rapids' carbon footprint is about 2 million metric tons, so 3.5 times a good size Michigan city, and these equity benefits that go with it. So I think it's a more comprehensive approach. It's riskier, but they're really kind of stepping ahead, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is going to work here in Michigan and across all of Michigan.
So, and I know, James, you had alluded to this in an earlier response, but when looking at legislation, whether current or future legislation, what role can legislation play in facilitating e-waste better? And in your case, it could be broader to recycling, but what role can or will legislation play in facilitating electronic waste? And that could be on behalf of residents, on behalf of businesses, communities, corporations. I think that it's wide enough real estate there, but what role can legislation play, or do you see playing?
I think there's room for voluntary programs, and there's room for, more command and control legislative programs. I mean, legislation also, is just budgets and funding for these things. But It is so cheap to bury things in Michigan. I think it's going to take legislation to say that you're not allowed to bury e-waste in landfills, that it has to go through some other process to make sure it's not reusable by some kid or some business that could use it that doesn't have the funds, or it's really toasted, but those key products have value. We're going to recognize that, and there's funding from the people who sell these to help make that happen.
I think it's a twofold. I think we need to really increase regulation on the aspects that truly harm us, right? And that's anytime e-waste is actually going in landfills, there is an environmental and harm to society, to people, specifically getting poisoned. So I do think the state and even the federal government needs to lean in on the regulation there and force people to make sure they're not harming each other. But beyond that, I think that's where you factor in incentives and incentivize up-and-coming entrepreneurs, small businesses to help solve this problem. I don't want to, sit up here and be prescriptive like the how we're going to solve the e-waste problem is easy. But I think that's the point: is we need more incentives to get the young, talented people into this space because it's ripe for innovation, it's ripe for growth. But we definitely need to hold the line on e-waste actually going into landfills because it is poisonous and it's not. It shouldn't really be an optional thing. It should be something that we all stand behind to make sure we're keeping the environment clean and healthy for us to be here.
Okay, so then there's 3 tiers of asking here: a local, a state, and a national. You have 3 asks. Now, you don't necessarily have to give me all 3, but what would be those asks as it relates to electronic waste, reducing electronic waste in the name of bridging the digital divide? So imagine that you had the mayor, the governor, the president, and you had your ability to ask them one thing around this. What does that look like? And I guess as you're thinking deeply, James has an answer. I would say that when looking at the city, I think specifically getting the city to take our e-waste and us refurbishing it. I mean, obviously that's the easiest one. That's the layup. So I decided to take that before you all did. On the state side, I think that definitely incentivizing or at least coming up with some type of subsidy for corporations, so to speak, to be able to be essentially rewarded for repurposing that e-waste, especially going to your point about it being just insanely cheap to bury things here. And then obviously at the federal level, I think that my ask would be baked much more into probably a similar subsidy model that would most likely look like a subsidy that would be loose enough for states to figure out how they would want to administer it, but that then being administered by the federal government, specifically through one of your entities like the Department of Energy, so to speak. That would be my play, but again, that might not necessarily be the way that you all would do it because again, I'm on the sidelines here. So same question, a little buffer to think through it. Whoever wants to go first, have at it.
I'll go quick. Totally agree. Local governments purchasing, there's an opportunity for them to not only purchase the right equipment, but make sure it's managed well at the end in their purchasing policies. I think at the feds, a lot of these products are made by multinational companies and regulating it at the federal level that you're not allowed to sell this stuff in the United States without a plan, and we can talk about what the best way is, but that stuff just doesn't go into landfills. I think with states, I think it's the economic activity and like how do we create those incentives for these new businesses, new jobs. Could be also tax breaks for those companies that do this well and get it back into your hands to get it back into people who need it, even if it is cheap to bury it here, because we're not going to be able to fix that quickly in Michigan. About that.
I just say let's continue to lead by example. Human IT in a year and a half and partnering with the city, we've brought in over 500,000 pounds of e-waste and have been able to distribute 15,000 devices. That's something that can continue to be scaled, and it's something that everyone can play a part in. Anyone listening to this, everyone works for a company or an organization, and that company or organization gets rid of e-waste at some point. By working with Human IT, we're able to empower companies to help bridge digital divide by the simple act of working with us when they're disposing of it. And so I think we already have a great thing going on here. And sometimes the citizens in the city needs to show the government what the right solution is. And I would say that's where we should lean in instead of waiting for the government, continue to show how there are solutions out there that work, and let's build upon those, because there's already been great success that we've had here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to end by saying this. We're looking at the digital divide. The thought process behind this, many folks had mentioned earlier about the sustainability of this issue. Well, sustainability in this case is twofold. One, from an environmental perspective, that's where sustainability comes in. But two, from a legitimate bridging of the digital divide from a longitudinal perspective, and that we need to be sustainable in our efforts and be able to show up in perpetuity. And I think being able to point to models where we're able to be a lot smarter about what we're getting rid of, opposed to always having to buy new over and over and over again, we can be a lot smarter here. And I think that that's where this conversation really manifests itself nicely within the context of the digital divide. The last question that I'm going to, or maybe it's even a bit of a statement for you all to reflect on, as we're looking at the future of e-waste, sustainability, and the digital divide, and everything that I just said, none of those are going anywhere. I mean, obviously our interventions are going to change the way we look at them, but they're not going anywhere. They're always going to be in some fashion. What do we need to be doing as an ecosystem collectively to ensure that we're representing ourselves best with this future? In other words, how are we looking at sustainability and doing it in a way of certainty? And what can we do to be much more certain in our efforts? Because as it stands right now, James, you had said at the very beginning, 150,000 right? 150,000 computers are thrown in a landfill a day, and you're talking about the $9 billion of essentially opportunity costs that we're missing. So clearly what we're doing today isn't working. Collectively, it's not. And so I guess the deeper question is, what do you think makes the most sense for us to course correct? How are we able to collectively course correct to be able to reduce your 9 billion that you mentioned and reduce the $150,000 or 150,000 computers that you mentioned? Where do you start and how do you course correct? Obviously, 9 billion to zero, that is the goal, but that's not what I'm charging you to answer today. I'm just saying what measures can be put in place to course correct our thinking to alleviate the way that we're going about this.
I think what James said was interesting, and this idea of like, one thing states can do is get out of the way of innovation at the local level. I think we've had some state legislatures that were very prescriptive of locals and kind of taking away the ability. And there's some great experiments going on that we need to celebrate, recognize. And I think the other piece in terms of course correcting is really being smart about recognizing all of the co-benefits that come with some of these activities. And I think we've been really short-sighted in, well, it's good for business that it's cheap to landfill stuff because that reduces their overall cost. But what we're missing is that billions of dollars of new labor income that's getting buried that we just paid a little more attention. And I'll tell one story that there's a lot of talk about it's China's fault that we're not recycling well. That was the market and they closed the doors and everything went upside down. Emmett County is a rural county in northern Michigan. And a colleague of mine helped build that recycling program over 30 years. 93% of everything they recycle stays in Michigan. And I would argue because they paid attention. They built relationships with their suppliers. And so they're stable supply chains, which is a whole other piece of this. We haven't even mentioned that the more we do this well in Michigan, those are supply chains that don't get broken across states, with big natural disasters. So I think it's looking at that broad suite of co-benefits that come with this, the economics, the environment, and the equity piece, which it's hard to quantify, but we know it's there.
I agree. To build on that, just better communicate the why and the multiple benefits. It's very easy for some of these issues to all end up in one bucket. That's just, these issues we know they're there, we know we need to fix them, but a lot of the energy and communication is very doom and gloom versus inspirational, and there are tangible solutions. So I think really leaning into that communication that, e-waste, it's not as bad as it seems. There's a lot of small things we can do differently to create massive change within the industry. And so I think leaning into those examples of people doing it the right way, cities doing it the right way, showcasing that, and continue to add more education around the multiple benefits, especially economic benefits, that you need to really get all the stakeholders behind a solution.
Well, I want to give a round of applause to our panelists here again. Thank you. Thanks to the both of you. Again, as we look at this conversation around electronic waste and larger sustainability, I mean, obviously what we've heard today, it's going to take a lot more stakeholders than who are in the room today, obviously, and even those watching. This is really a concentrated effort. It's going to take a lot of leadership at a variety of levels, from the community level all the way up to the president's desk, of prioritizing the way that we think about electronic waste and being very, I would say, prescriptive about some of the challenges that are currently existing, but also at the same time providing a counterbalance to all the benefits, because I don't think that's being made apparent. And I'm thankful for the folks who are able to pull something like together today, because we're putting electronic waste on the center stage. And historically, that has not been on the center stage. We've kind of treated it at the margins. And the fact that we're saying that it's pivotal and critical to our efforts, I think that means something. So again, thank you for joining us today. And I think that now we can transition into wrapping this thing up. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right. Well, for our very last event today, really we want to do a bit of award reception. And this is something where our first time around, we didn't do that. Our second time around, we wanted to do that and we didn't do it. So our third time around, we're finally able to do what we initially wanted to do at the very beginning, which was recognizing folks and actually gave them their roses while they're still here. And realistically, this came from a lot of our committee works, respectively, throughout Connector N3. And so obviously you're hearing the Policy Advocacy and Ecosystem Committee stepping up huge in honor of Digital Inclusion Week. And this came from them, this latest iteration, the awards, them sourcing who, and actually going back and deliberating on who is deserving of award and the recognition. And so just know, award recipients, this really came from the heart, from multiple hearts, I should say, and folks who all shared in believing that you have a critical role in reducing the digital divide. So this is a really big thanks. Hang this on your walls. Look at this with pride, because we put a lot of pride into this. So the first award is we're looking at our Youth Advocate. Obviously, for the folks who were here today, you were able to see Detroit is Limitless. You were inspired by that incredible documentary. You see why it won a regional Emmy. And as you meet this young individual, he's done a fantastic job of transforming the way that youth, and quite frankly, the way that adults in the city think about technology. We'd be remiss if we weren't able to acknowledge Javelle Arnold. So Javelle Arnold, we are nominating you to receive the Youth Advocate Award for Connector N3. I didn't even clap. I should have clapped. It's a long way down. You sure you don't want to hand it to him? No, you can. I have it. Oh yeah, we got to do the picture. That happens. Yeah, you do have to go up there and say a few words. You gotta say something.
So it's a good honor to get this reward. I actually wasn't expecting to get this, but I am very honored to have this. Now looking back on the things that I did, I do think I accomplished a lot. I've set out my goals to become a teacher, and I was able to manage and reach that goal thanks to multiple companies such as Microsoft for giving me the internship, to Code 313, of who I'm still working with today, helping me become a teacher at the Plymouth Education Center. It's on Warren. But I just want to thank everybody for the support throughout all my 3 years of doing this, ever since that internship. I want to thank Warren Flood. I want to thank my teachers from high school. My teacher, Judy Dent, she really pushed me towards being a greater person and pursuing my career. I also want to thank all my coworkers at Code 303. My coworker, Gary Beaver, he helps me every day. When teaching students, he always gives me tips. He always makes me a better person. And I want to say thank you to my boss, Bartel Welch. He always gave me good advice whenever I need it. When I'm needing help at Wayne State, he always there for me. So I just want to say thank you for this award today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And this next award, this goes to an individual. When I first came to Detroit, and I was still doing my rounds in 2019, he actually took me into it was actually Bamboo at the time. He took me there and was like, "Hey, just want to talk to you." And we had a conversation about a lot of different things, but really what I admired about him was his leadership and his willingness to give back. This was a guy who was working in New York, just really getting it done out there. And he saw the ability around financial empowerment, what that could do to communities, and said, well, you know what? I'm not just going to be the only financially empowered one. I want to make sure that the folks that called Detroit home, just like I did, I want to make sure that they are in a position of being financially empowered as well. And obviously the work didn't stop there. What they've been able to accomplish specifically with empowering youth in the next generation has been incredible. The way that they've been able to shift the landscape as it relates to specifically working with youth on coding and making sure that we are now getting youth who have skills that are built for the future, that are marketable, that then can unlock that financial empowerment. That's tremendous. And so for folks who are aware, the Digital Inclusion Nonprofit Award goes to Journey, specifically Richard Grundy. I told you it's a long way down. I said the last one, it's a long walk down. You got it. I'm fine. Go ahead. No, you already have it in your hand. Oh yeah, you gotta get your shot first. Then when you get you your shot, yeah.
Thank you for this award. I wasn't expecting the email for this award. I didn't even know it was an award. So, yeah, I want to say thank you for the award. Thank you for all the collaboration. As you said, I came here back from New York, from Detroit, and it's been so many different people that are willing to work together to move the city forward. And it's people that's from here, people that's not from here. And I really appreciate everybody does what they say they're gonna do. There's not a shortage of mentorship, of people willing to work together. So it's beautiful to be here and empower the city. Thank you.
All right, so this next award goes towards, and you're already sitting down here, great. When COVID obviously happened, a lot of things were stressed and strained, and we know that, and they still are. But under the leadership of Detroit Means Business, that kind of shifted the narrative, so to speak. A lot of folks were expecting Connect 313 to carry the burdens of addressing some of the challenges associated with small businesses within COVID. And we're like, there's absolutely no way, absolutely not. Because they're like, well, in your mission, you talk about bridging the digital divide on behalf of, they list it, they told me the mission over and over again. I'm like, yeah, I know what our mission is, but I also know what our capacity is. We do not have the ability to specifically empower every small business in a way that we can be useful. I think that a lot of the stuff that we would give them would be things that are like, what? I already have internet, but I don't necessarily have a point of sale system that can help me sell things online. I don't even have a web page for my business. Help me out. And again, we didn't have that bandwidth to be able to do that. But you know who did? You know who did step up? Detroit Means Business. And I think that when you look at a strong or a thriving community, there's a huge emphasis on businesses, obviously. That's what we most likely quantify what a successful city would look like, the amount of businesses we're able to produce. And I think that on the other side of that, the amount of businesses we're able to protect, that we're able to advocate for funding, the ability to even lift them up in a way where now the public is actually aware. And that's exactly what Detroit Means Business did. And that's what they continue to do. Now, I look at Detroit Means Business as a complementary promise to this ecosystem in a way where they're now operating at a level where businesses are aware of them and they're a resource where they can say, hey, Detroit Means Business, they have my back. And so when looking at the Small Business Hero Award, that goes to specifically Detroit Means Business, and peers in the crowd, come on up here. Yeah, see, I said it. Picture.
On behalf of the small business ecosystem here in Detroit, just want to thank Connect 313 for this award. It's truly an honor. As mentioned, Detroit Means Business was formed out of necessity. When COVID-19 first hit in the city of Detroit, in all honesty, we began to panic. Our small businesses were shut down. Small businesses make up nearly 50% of the jobs in the city of Detroit. And so we quickly mobilized our small business ecosystem here around just one major effort, and that was we want to keep as many of our small businesses open as possible. We have some amazing partners that are a part of the small business ecosystem in Detroit, from the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation to our partners at Invest Detroit, TechTown, DDF, you name it. It is a 65-member organization coalition that makes up Detroit Means Business. And like a colony of ants, we all band together to do everything that we can to support our small businesses and carry them on our backs. And I think the last thing I'll say is Detroit Means Business is also fairly unique in that we actually have a group of business owners that guide everything that we do. They let us know. We have a lot of real talk sessions with them, and they let us know what has worked historically in the ecosystem and what hasn't worked. And so we are just getting started. We are a year in, so from an organizational standpoint, we're in our infancy, but we look forward to continuing to serve the small businesses in Detroit and continuing to work as a coalition to do everything that we can to make Detroit and Detroit small business more digitally inclusive across the board. So again, Connect 313, thank you. It's truly an honor to accept this award on behalf of Detroit Means Business and the small business ecosystem.
That's Katie. All right. So this last person who's getting an award, this is a special one. Obviously, all the other ones are too, so don't feel bad. But this one's special for a number of ways, and I think this one's actually more personal to me. So in January, actually, I'm going to go back to 2018. In 2018, in the fall, I was still in Cleveland. And I was working at the Cleveland Foundation and investing in how to build out a digital equity ecosystem. And so that work in Northeast Ohio, it was interesting. I liked it. I mean, I enjoyed it, and it was comfortable. And I saw this position, a digital inclusion policy fellow. And I was like, I could probably do that job. And then I applied. And then I remember strongly just freaking out and then saying, no, actually, I don't want that job. Why did I apply? That was a horrible idea. So then I turned it down when they called me. I'm like, nope, wrong person. I didn't do that. I don't know whose that is. And then they called again, and then I turned them down again. And then they called again, and I turned them down again. Though, through all those turning this job down, finally, Beth Niblock, who obviously now made the move to be the CIO of HUD, was the CIO of the city. She called me and said, look, we're doing this. You're the person to do it. Come on, come to Detroit. So I moved to Detroit, and I had a meeting with Katie Locker when she was still at the Knight Foundation at TechTown, right across the street. We had a meeting. And I remember saying all the things that I wanted or believed needed to be done because, again, looking at what needs to be in a digital equity ecosystem, saying, hey, this is a baseline. If we want to be serious, we want to be serious in this conversation, baseline, this is what we need. And I remember Katie didn't really show a lot of emotion in that meeting, and I didn't know how to read her. So then I was just like, in my imposter syndrome, I was like, oh gosh, she didn't believe in you. You were the wrong hire. Like, that's exactly why she wasn't like the way that she was. Yeah, I was horrible at reading people before. I'm a little bit better now. But in any case, as I began looking into the backstory of how this role came to be, Katie fought for this role. Knight Foundation, like most foundations, don't look at the money now because a lot of us get seduced into thinking that, oh, there was always funding. There wasn't funding for digital inclusion. There never was funding for digital inclusion. Everyone was always just scraping something and expecting a miracle to happen. And so all the funding that you're seeing now, a lot of that is built off of back pay and back ask. It's almost like when you print something like 30 times. Yeah, that's what we're getting now with all this funding. That was supposed to be funding in place beforehand. That being said, the Knight Foundation in around 2018, 2019, well, actually before that, around 2017, this is, Katie was advocating for a role within municipal government that could essentially see the entire ecosystem. That could be the one person that's gonna wake up and go to bed and be the most knowledgeable person about the digital divide in that ecosystem. That's what Katie was pushing for. She was met with a lot of pushback. Her organization, at the time, they were not necessarily where she was. She was way ahead of the way that, way ahead. That is now a model that you see other municipalities stepping up and saying, well, we want a point person, how'd you do it? And every single time I retell that story, I always had to say the Knight Foundation and Katie Locker. That was what leadership was. Leadership isn't, and obviously you all know this, leadership isn't the comfortable thing to say. You heard earlier today from Francello Chillo within the keynote, specifically about the way that she's been engaging people. You hear the way that she's talking. You know there's some people that are like, man, something about her I just don't like. Yeah, that's her personality. But she gets things done. And when I look at someone like Katie, who fundamentally believed in this work in a way that none of those people saw to be true, and she fought for that, and that was her last heroic effort, I would say, before she departed from the Knight Foundation, that means the world to me. And it means the world to me because obviously the work of Connect Through and 3 and all this stuff happens, that doesn't happen without Katie. Us being in this room today does not happen without Katie's leadership at the time that she had it. And so it's a great honor for me to present the Digital Inclusion Advocate Award to Katie Locker. I was looking, like, who has the plaque? I'm like, you don't got the plaque? Wait, there's no award?
Thank you.
Oh, we're supposed to take the picture.
Oh.
I mess it up all the time.
Lee, my old friend.
Well, I came because I believed in Joshua from day one. I maybe had a poker face, but I got an invitation to come to this more than 2 years since I left the Knight Foundation, which is really who invested in Joshua's position. But I just want to reinforce that Joshua's it. Without Joshua and Beth Niblock's leadership, none of this is possible. It is one of my great prides to have fought for the investment that brought somebody to really focus on this issue in Detroit so that everyone could come together and bring greater resources around the issue of digital inclusion. So I'm very honored to be recognized, and I really appreciate that Joshua has continued to acknowledge that Knight played a key role in making this happen for Detroit. Thank you.
I'll close it off. Well, again, we want to thank everybody for their commitments and their contributions. Thank you to our sponsors who are able to make this possible. Obviously, this is our first event of the week. We have a lot of events. So for those of you who are presenting, and I'm not telling myself, or maybe, false extrovert energy, conserve it because we have a whole week of this. But again, I want to really thank everyone for showing up. If we look at what today is, we said today was leadership and policy. And that was written in a way where, yeah, leadership comes first. So every single person in this room, we're thankful for your leadership. We're thankful for the reason why you're here today. There are some folks who are going to take back what they heard today, and they're going to take it into their boardroom. There's been a few folks who I've talked about like that, and just know that we have your back here. We're backing you. If there's any way that we can think about bridging this digital divide, if there's any resource that we have yet to tap, we want to empower you to tap that resource collectively. In addition to that, I want to extend a special thanks to obviously Next Century Cities with Francella Ochillo. She is an amazing force. You know, it kind of feels weird me saying that she's a force because it's almost like I look at her as significantly light years above me with respect to the way that she thinks about this work. And we're just honored that we're able to be a Next Century City. I'm going to close by saying, obviously, yes, all my continued thanks to everybody here, that please make sure that we are sharing this on social media. And this isn't necessarily just for, you know, a few likes. And obviously, you all know that. I don't like social media. But there's a real value in it as it relates to storytelling and advocacy and awareness. You all remember on the healthcare panel, the thing that they kept drilling in, that if there's anything that we can do within Connect 313, is that we can advocate. And so I'd be remiss if I did not mention our emergency broadband benefit. Y'all knew I was going to do it, so okay. But our emergency broadband benefit, you know, we have been doing an incredible job in Detroit on this. So much so that I believe on Wednesday, we're going to be on a panel with other leading cities orchestrated by the Federal Communications Commission. The emergency broadband benefit is a $50 a month subsidy on internet bills. Thus far, since June 7th, that's when our call center got stood up. Yeah, our local call center. A lot of other communities can't say that, but that's when it got stood up. Since then, we've enrolled over 45,000 Detroit families into that benefit. And yeah, that is clapworthy. Yeah, it is. And I think that at this point, with that amount of families, yeah, that's great, but that's what we're supposed to do. And I'm not losing sight of that either. And I've definitely gone public with this, so this doesn't need like oh yeah, cool. It doesn't need all that, but you know, we went in front of media the other day because out of the $3.2 billion that this program was initially allocated or appropriated, we've only spent as a nation $600 million. And this was meant to be for all the folks on the wrong side of the digital divide. That's why there was so much money that got put into it. But what was the hang up? Why weren't people signing up? People were not signing up because people aren't aware, because there's not a concentrated advocacy strategy around that. We have that in Detroit. We have our call center stood up. We have families who are enrolling in this. We have families who are now trusting that process. We're now working with AARP to distribute this to all of our churches throughout Detroit. We are on the ground, we're getting it done. The thing that I'm gonna ask for each and every one of you, I mean, if you want to make a post on it, I would love that the most. But if you're able to just spread the word, share the word with organizations, any organization that you like, that you work, it doesn't matter if you already see them involved in it. It doesn't matter if it's, hey, well, I want to tell the United Way about the emergency broadband benefit. United Way is profoundly aware of it. But again, we need to make sure that we are taking advantage of this subsidy as much as possible, not just from a policy perspective. We've all seen the recent floods in Detroit. They have been devastating. And when you begin looking at what people have lost, and you begin looking at, combining that with COVID-19, there are a lot of people who need help and critical resources. This is a critical resource that's obviously centered to the work that we do, but again, it's a critical resource nonetheless that if we're looking at word of mouth as a vehicle for conveying additional trust, then we need to be talking about this. And so I'm just going to ask if folks can spread the word. 313-241-7618. That is the phone number to call. I'm just going to ask. I'll beg, but I'm on camera. That everyone makes that a big priority. But again, big thanks for folks who were able to come out today. Huge shout out to TechTown for hosting us. And for the rest of the week, I will see you all at Marygrove. Thanks, everybody.